What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories.
11 rupees. Chapter 251. The sea breeze blows, and the black flag hunts and shakes. At the bow of the ship, Jiāng Liú looked at the undulating sea, but his thoughts had returned to a few months ago. Thank you very much for being able to sail with you for so long and witnessing so many great and ancient things. But, it's time for me to go back. Seniors of Ohara are still waiting for me to expose everything that was hidden by time. Albia said with a smile. This book is everything I have experienced and witnessed along the way. I used 2 grammars to compile it. I also have a hunch that you may use it in the future, Captain. Afterwards, Orbia handed a thick note to Jiāng Liú. This is. After turning a page, Jiāng Liú said in surprise. It's everything we have along the way, and it's our raftel. Albia laughed. Thank you very much Destiny for letting us meet on the sea, and thank you very much, Captain, for taking me with you and seeing all this. The difference is very good. Orbia is very optimistic and very open-minded. The purpose, our dream, she came out of Ohara has been fulfilled, seeing the historical text, and reaching the final island. At home, there is her partner, her daughter. You may be in unexpected danger when you go back, Orbia. Jiāng Liú said in a deep voice. He changed the destiny of the other party, but it is unknown whether this destiny will change in the future. Danger. I have seen too much along the way. People are inherently dead, but the value of my life has been realized. Even if you die, you must have left this world with a smile. Albia said with a smile, not caring about the danger. Since you are determined, I won't keep you. As the captain, I allow you to leave the ship. Jiāng Liú sighed and said. Thank you Captain, and I hope we can see each other again in the future. Orbia turned around and waved goodbye. In Jiāng Liú's memory, Orbia has only been away for a few months, but as time passed, 20 years have passed. The vicissitudes of life, things are different, nothing is better than this. During this period of time, he flipped through the past newspapers and got a lot of information. The black flag was hidden, and Letterfield was captured. Marine cleaned, investigated and arrested the Roger pirates and the Black Flag pirates. A large number of crew members were arrested and sent to Impel Down. Among them, the Ohara incident still happened. The scholars' research and the information brought back by Orbia made them step into hell with 1 foot. World government will naturally not let them go. The Buster Call opened, the sea of flames buried everything in Ohara, and Orbia was buried in the sea, which aroused the anger of the Black Flag group. Nearly 100 warships rushed out of the Black Forbidden Zone, destroying a new base built by Marine in New World, and seeing Orbia off. This incident caused a shock in this world. But then, with the disappearance of the Black Flag, everything was overwhelmed. Nico Robin. Jiāng Liú's complexion became complicated when he spit out a name. Looking down at the reward order in his hand, he was very emotional. It is impossible to imagine how such a girl has survived alone from above the sea. Captain. Waldo came over and looked at the photo on the reward order. Such a little girl, offering a reward of 80 million. He was a little surprised. I have always been wondering why a girl has a higher bounty than me. Ace was also puzzled. She holds what the world government fears, just like Orbia back then. Jiāng Liú said lightly. Orbia, Waldo and others were all taken aback. They were naturally familiar with this woman, and they personally sent each other away. What did the captain mean? Is this little girl mastering ancient characters? Everyone was surprised. Jiāng Liú nodded. Of course, the Black Pearl arrived at the rape port in the afternoon. The group quickly disembarked and entered this coastal port city. But when they came again, they discovered the difference in this city. I remember it used to be a beautiful city with green trees. Yes, now the city is full of yellow sand. What happened? 20 years of changes are really confusing. Everyone talked a lot, and they continued to walk inside. Our purpose here is to find a girl named Nico Robin. Remember your mission. Jiāng Liú said. 3 days later, they rode camels through the sand dunes to Albana, the capital of Alabasta. It's like a port, the sky is gray, it seems that it hasn't rained for a long time, and the air is full of dust. Everyone covered their faces with scarves, frowning from time to time. This place is really not suitable for human habitation. Obviously it wasn't like this before. In the end what happened? They were puzzled. At noon that day, Jiāng Liú brought a group of people to the gate of the palace in Albana. Please tell your majesty Cobra for me, the old man is here to visit. The guarding soldier showed a puzzled expression on his face. Can you leave a name? Black Flag, Jiāng Liú. Jiāng Liú smiled. Please wait a moment. The soldier didn't criticize, turned and ran in. After a while, Jiāng Liú and others saw inside the palace. Now middle-aged Nefertiti Cobra wore a crown and strode out with a look of excitement. It's really you, Your Excellency Jiāng Liú. Cobra came to the crowd and exclaimed excitedly. I thought I would never see you again. Jiāng Liú carefully observed the other person for a few moments, made sure that the guy in front of him was not a stand-in, and smiled slightly. Please pay attention to your majesty, we are pirates. Ha 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 ha. Cobra laughed. Please come in with me, come to the palace to sit down. Then he turned and led the way. After a while, a group of people sat in the palace hall. Cobra sat on the throne, smiling. Since I made a bet back then on Jiāng Liú, there is no room for regret. The final result also proved that I was right. You succeeded and successfully reached that island. After a pause, Cobra looked serious. Disappearing for 20 years must be related to what the island got, right? Jiāng Liú smiled and nodded slightly. Cobra guessed correctly. I knew it. I knew that the black flag would not disappear for no reason. Jiāng Liú, a powerful figure like you, would not just die like that. I knew it. Cobra yelled again and again. Finally, he just looked straight and solemnly said. I need your help, Jiāng Liú. Chapter 252. Advertise here. Jiāng Liú raised his wine glass with a smile on his face, and he was not surprised by the sudden change in Cobra's conversation. He could see the changes in Alabasta clearly along the way. Your Majesty, Cobra is my friend. I will definitely help you if you are a favor. Please speak up. Hearing this, Cobra let out a deep sigh before he said solemnly. In the 20 years since the black flag disappeared, the sea has changed and many things have happened. First of all, the number of pirates has increased sharply. Because of the words of the pirate king Roger, the world has entered the era of pirates. Then marine, in order to suppress the pirates and reduce his pressure, the world government issued the Shichibukai plan. After a pause, Cobra's voice was low. The Wuhai plan represents the recruitment of large pirates who have done evil in the past to legalize their plunder and crime. In exchange, Wuhai must also help marine deal with the pirates at a critical moment to suppress the situation in the entire sea. At 18, many problem areas were created. Wuhai's predecessors were pirates. They were brutal, selfish, and greedy. After owning a territory, even plundering becomes legal. For civilians, this is undoubtedly a disaster. Taking a deep breath, Cobra looked at Jiāng Liú. In Alabasta today, there is a Shichibukai. You walked all the way to Albana, believing that everything you saw on the road is very different from 20 years ago, right? These are all done by Wuhai. Jiāng Liú raised the wine glass and delivered it to his mouth, his expression unchanged. Of course he knew all this, but others didn't know it. Hearing Cobra's words, his complexion was hard to look at. I remember Albana, the canola port. It used to be a beautiful city lined with trees. Now the sky is full of yellow sand, and the surface is dry and cracked everywhere. Waldo said solemnly. Is it all made by the so-called Shichibukai? Cyrus said coldly. They are certainly not guys with a sense of justice, but as pirates, they still have the most basic integrity. Merely relying on marine to deal with the pirates in turn, for them, has already violated the principles of the pirates. This Shichibukai, who is now in Alabasta, is called Crocodile, and he has great strength. What's even more outrageous is that he is now the hero of our country. Having said that, Cobra smiled helplessly. Father. At this moment, a blue-haired girl next to her spoke softly, tears also in her eyes. She often goes to the streets secretly, and the scenes she sees make people feel uncomfortable and sad. Since Crocodile came here, people's life has become more and more difficult. Even the most basic food and drinking water have become problems. Father King once said that the man he admired and convinced the most was the man named Shimotsuki Jiāng Liú and the pirate named Haichi. He said that although you are pirates, you have done earth-shattering things. I also said that if you show up again, you will definitely help Alabasta drive away Crocodile. I beg you, help father, help Alabasta. The blue-haired girl cried, pleaded loudly, and then bent down deeply. Vivi. Cobra sighed and patted his daughter. There was silence inside the palace. Jiāng Liú, Waldo, Cyrus, Sebastian, Bin Jack, Gairam, Nakan and others did not speak. They looked gloomy and held wine glasses in their hands. Captain. Suddenly, Cyrus spoke. Ha, I get it. Jiāng Liú grinned, but his eyes were cold. Crocodile. Never heard before. His Majesty Cobra is my good friend. We naturally want to help him fulfill his request. These words immediately calmed down the expressions of all the people present. Your Majesty Cobra, just tell me where this Shichibukai is, and we will naturally visit him. Jiāng Liú smiled and said. The Alabasta matter, we will also help you solve it. After a pause, Jiāng Liú looked at Cobra again. But before that, I have to ask your Majesty Cobra to find someone for me. Cobra got a reply, feeling very excited, and hurriedly said, Who? Nico Robin, she should now be in the killer organization called Baroque Job Club, codenamed Miss All Sunday. Jiāng Liú slowly uttered a name. Cobra was taken aback, then nodded solemnly. I will definitely arrange for the person below to find out where this person is as soon as possible. Jiāng Liú smiled slightly, then threw a reward order in front of the opponent. This is her. If you see it, please contact me immediately. We will stay in Alabasta for a while. Don't worry about Crocodile. Cobra nodded. Then please come to Lord Jiāng Liú. I have arranged a place for you to live, and a place to rest. Subsequently, under the leadership of the guards, Jiāng Liú and others lived directly in the palace. Father, who are they? I only heard you mention their names before. Can they really deal with Crocodile? When Jiāng Liú and others left, Vivi said worriedly. Do not worry. Compared to Lord Jiāng Liú and his black flag, Crocodile is nothing. Cobra smiled. If Crocodile gets the news that the black flag is here, I'm afraid I will lose sleep. As he said, Cobra laughed. Vivi had never seen his father when he was so happy. At the same time, the Baroque work agency, in a dark room. Chi-chi-chi-chi. The sound of the flame igniting the cigar came out clearly, and a deep, solemn sound came out. My lord, what do you come to Alabasta for? Such a character, reappearing in the world, is already surprised enough. He even came to my sight. It's really a troublesome thing. As soon as he finished speaking, the girl wearing a cowboy hat next to him smiled and spoke. What? Are you afraid of Master Jiāng Liú? Mr. Zero. Mr. Zero. Crocodile glanced at each other, then sneered. The pirates of this world, I'm afraid there is no one who is not afraid of him. How do you know his greatness? After speaking, Crocodile took a deep sip of his cigar. In those days, even me. Revere him like a god too. Chapter 253. Advertise here. The girl's face was slightly startled, and she was surprised. She didn't expect that this man named Jiāng Liú had such a strength that the big boss in front of her was so afraid. Her eyes flickered, and she remembered in a daze the conversation with her mother when she was a child. Don't be afraid, Robin, on the sea in the future, there will definitely be a group of people who make you feel safe. In my mother's memory, there are also such a group of people, if you meet them in the future. Having said that, Orbia smiled. Forget it, you will have your own travel and your own happiness. After a pause, the mother said again. If you meet your mother's group of friends in the future, you must say hello to them for me. In a daze, the girl saw the gentle woman again. The partners she said are these people. Muttered in his heart, Robin had a keen interest in the Black Flag group. For her, it was a wonderful thing that this scared crocodile, and the trembling person was her mother's partner. What kind of history did they have? Robin asked softly. Crocodile suddenly raised his head and stared at her. Robin looked at her without fear. You seem to be curious about them. But I have to warn you, to this group of people, even if you have the code name of the son of the devil, you are nothing more than ants. With that, Crocodile grinned. I am now, on the contrary, very curious about their purpose of coming to Alabasta. Is it the same as us? Robin smiled. Kaido. This group seems to have a very good relationship with His Majesty Cobra. You don't know pirates, Crocodile said lightly. He took a sip of his cigar, and then spit out a ring of smoke, slowly making a sound. The big things this man has done, the cruel things, are 100 times stronger than me. And Alabasta, what's the point? Robin's eyes condensed slightly, and at the same time he became wary of the group of people in Crocodile's words. She has encountered too many things in recent years, and the pirates' despicableness, viciousness, and cruelty are extremely clear. There is no way to understand each other before they meet each other, and even if they get along day and night, they can't really distinguish the true face of the other person. What's more, this group of people are their mother's partners, but not their own. Go out, be careful during this time, and pay special attention to the dynamics of this group of people. Crocodile's voice drifted away. Robin turned and left. The curiosity in her heart for the Black Flag gang became stronger and stronger. I have lived alone in this world for so long, and I have encountered many hardships. When it comes to people or things about her mother, Orbia, she always feels a little cordial. The Black Flag group is undoubtedly such a person. Even if she kept reminding herself that this group of people was dangerous, even more dangerous than Crocodile, she still couldn't bear the thought of exploring. 3 days later, in a quiet bar, Robin sat quietly by the window, watching the pedestrians walking back and forth outside. During this period of time, the Baroque Work Club will naturally not stop paying attention to the palace and the Black Flag, and they are very solemn about it. The dynamics of the Black Flag made Crocodile feel tremendous pressure. Because all the news that gotten showed that the spearhead of this group was directed at themselves. I don't know what agreement the group of Haichi and Cobra reached. Recently, the people in the palace were searching for the address of the Baroque Work Agency. This kind of thing is serious. Once it was clear that the Black Flag would do something to himself, Crocodile believed that even if there were 100 of himself, he would probably not be able to withstand the crazy attack of the Black Flag. This also makes Crocodile, recently there is no time to take care of his partner, Mr. Zero. It also gives Robin free time to go out, and the reason why she is here is because yesterday, when she was walking on the street, she didn't know when, there was an extra piece of paper in her hand. There were very few words on the note, and it only indicated one location, this bar, this location. Robin doesn't know who the other party is, but he has a foreboding. It may be a crucial person. The wine on the table was very clear. Robin held the glass and shook it slowly, his eyes looking towards the door from time to time. After a while, a figure walked slowly, looking different from what she had imagined, as if only a few years older than her. The visitor is nearly 3 meters tall. He stands out in this bar, with a long knife slung around his waist. His face is handsome, with a faint smile, and he looks very friendly. After he came in, he stared at Robin with a smile, then came to the seat in 3 steps and sat down naturally. Quote. Sorry for the waiting. Quote. With a snap of his fingers, Jiāng Liú turned his head towards the bar. Rum, it's going to be chilled, thanks a lot. Robin blinked and looked at the man in front of her. She naturally didn't know the identity of the other person, but she was sure that it should be the person who gave her a note yesterday. You are Robin. The visitor was very direct, and said her name with a smile. This caused Robin's pupils to shrink and he was stunned there for a while. Her identity has always been mysterious, and only a few people know it. And this is all because of the difficult living environment after leaving Ohara. There are untrustworthy people everywhere, conspiracies and tricks everywhere. But the person called her name directly, which made Robin feel uneasy. 20 years, her child is already this old. Jiāng Liú took the rum and said with a sigh. Hearing that, Robin was shocked, and there was already some kind of speculation in her heart. She looked at each other in shock, and asked in a trembling voice, "The money is good, are you?" Jiāng Liú. My name is Jiāng Liú, Shimotsuki Jiāng Liú. Captain of the Black Flag Pirate Group. Jiāng Liú did not hide his identity at all, and said directly. Really? Robin was shaking all over, opened his mouth to say something, but couldn't say it. Your mother, Orbia, was once my crew member and our partner. That year, I personally saw her farewell, and she returned to her hometown, but she didn't expect it to be a farewell. Jiāng Liú looked gloomy and sighed. What they did to Orbia, I will return it. 20 years, I don't know what you experienced above the sea, how did you join a work agency like Baroque? But from today, no one will bully you. Jiāng Liú had sharp eyes and uttered 4 words. No one will do. Chapter 254. Advertise here. Robin was shaking. She wanted to say something, but she couldn't say it. The man in front of her made her feel the intimacy of her relatives, an emotion that she hadn't experienced in nearly 10 years, welling up from her heart, making her tears burst into her eyes. Oh, Orbia told me about you. She said that she is the happiest in her life, and the most precious wealth she has is you. Heiki's partner. Robin was crying while talking. Jiāng Liú nodded slightly, raised the cup, and suddenly grinned. Celebrate our reunion, celebrate Robin you, and the last relative in this world. I never said that if Orbia disembarked, she would always be a Black Flag crew member. As her daughter, of course you are also our closest relatives. Robin wiped his tears, raised the cup in his hand, and nodded his head heavily. She is happy, excited, but emotionally complex. The perennial calmness disappeared, and there was a feeling of helplessness, anxiety and happiness. The 2 cups quickly collided and made a loud sound. I'm sorry, Robin, we have missed these 20 years and haven't witnessed many stories. After a sip of wine, Jiāng Liú looked sorry again. Orbia, before she died, she was still talking about you, still thinking of the Black Flag, thinking of you, Captain. Robin wept. The memory of that scene in her heart was too deep, and the gunfire rang out, and Orbia hugged her with a smile, encouraging her to escape alone and telling her not to fear the future. Above the sea, there are a group of close relatives waiting for her. One day, they will meet again on the vast sea, and they will also walk through every inch of land and every scenery that their mother has stepped on. Now, here, she finally met the captain whom her mother spoke highly of and admired. He was as young as the other party said, and for 20 years, it seemed that he had never happened to the other party. The gentle and kind temperament made her feel full of security. This feeling was even more fascinating than the taste of family members she had ever experienced. This is left by your mother. I think it should be your treasure. Jiāng Liú took a thick note from his arms and placed it in front of Robin. This is. Robin's face was shocked, and he asked suspiciously. Your mother sailed the whole world with us back then. She recorded everything she experienced on the way in this notebook on the last stop of the Great Channel. And named it Black Travels. It can be said that it is the most precious treasure in her life, and it is also a masterpiece destined to have a profound impact on the entire world. Jiāng Liú smiled and introduced. The bilingual translation is absolutely prohibited by the world government, and it is also extremely terrifying to the world. Robin took a deep breath, rubbed the surface of the notebook, looked at the short text, and saw the ancient text used below. She was shocked. This kind of text. Yes, your mother, the study of ancient characters has reached an incredible level and point. Every text in this notebook uses 2 types of text. It is a travel note and a teaching book at the same time. It means that even an ordinary person can rely on it to translate the difficult words in the historical text. Jiāng Liú said slowly. Robin's eyes widened in shock. Even for her, she is only at the stage of learning and exploring ancient texts, and she can only understand it roughly. But the words in this notebook show that her mother's knowledge of ancient writing has reached the point where it can be used. Thank you. With respect, Robin said seriously. For her, the value of this notebook surpasses any treasure in the world, not to mention her mother's legacy, just the ancient text recorded on it is an unimaginable treasure. Slowly turning over the first page of the notebook, Robin looked at it intently. From today, I will be a witness, quietly observing and recording the rise of a pirate group and the way to the top of a king. Orbia. This is the first page of the notebook and the beginning of this travel note. The full text unfolds a magnificent story with Orbia's vision. It was a stormy shipwreck. My companion and I fell into the sea. When I was awake, I saw a group of pirates with ferocious faces. At that time, I didn't know that this was the moment when my destiny changed in my life. Robin quickly saw this, and she was a little excited, because it meant that the story between her mother and the man in front of her had begun. She flipped the page quickly, and couldn't wait to know what happened next. What's even more incredible is that the bottom of the text was also rewritten with ancient text. By comparing the two, she was able to quickly grasp the originally unfamiliar text. Turn the page, turn the page again. One by one, she has never seen and thought about the places and stories that she has never seen before. The historical text of Alabasta actually exists, and the mother and the others have already been there. Robin couldn't help but raise his head and glanced at Jiāng Liú. This means that the purpose of the opponent coming to Alabasta is completely different from Crocodile. So, what is it for? As if seeing Robin's question, Jiāng Liú smiled. We came here to find you, Robin. Robin shook his whole body, took a breath, and smiled. After entering the palace to meet with His Majesty Cobra, he also asked us to deal with Crocodile. As an old friend, I have promised him. Jiāng Liú smiled and said. In other words, are you going to face Crocodile opponents next? Robin asked suspiciously. She temporarily stopped reading the thick notebook and was obviously concerned about Crocodile. Good. Your Majesty Cobra will find where he is, and we will go personally and have a face-to-face exchange with him. Jiāng Liú said with a faint smile. However, as Shichibukai, Crocodile has many powerful killers under his command, and he holds even more powerful power. He is not easy to deal with. Robin said worried. Believe in our strength. Jiāng Liú said with a smile. Let's go. Follow me to meet other people. They are all your relatives. After that, Jiāng Liú got up. Robin was also excited and nervous. What kind of group was his mother's partner back then? Compared to Crocodile, I still think our business is more important. After walking out of the door of the bar, Jiāng Liú smiled. Robin nodded his head. Chapter 255. The Royal Palace of Albana. Ha 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 ha. Robin, Orbige's daughter. Too surprised, I didn't expect her daughters to be this old already. With bursts of surprised laughter, and an atmosphere of joy filled the small courtyard, a group of the Black Flag pirates gathered together. Everyone was watching, standing in the middle with an embarrassed face, but a little excited girl. The eyebrows were somewhat similar to Orbia, but there were some differences in temperament. The girl looked bold and wary, her face was a bit heroic and brave. Waldo. Cyrus. Jiāng Liú pointed to the person next to him and reported his name. The person who was called quickly introduced himself. For Orbige's daughter, everyone had a gentle and kind heart. This is the first time they have seen their next generation. Robin has obviously become for their treasure. Karma, Sebastian, Nachan, Guilhem. A group of figures stood out, and Robin's eyes kept scanning everyone's faces, trying to quickly write down the people in front of him. It's kind of he. She made a strange laugh, which made everyone's eyes slightly change, but she didn't care. Jiāng Liú's face darkened, but he knew the reason for the other person's smile. It's great to meet everyone. My name is Nico Robin. Robin bent over and said with a smile, tears flickering in her eyes. I finally met my mother's friends at this moment. They are different from the imagination, but they are exactly the same. As my mother said, this group of partners are treasures that are worth remembering for a lifetime, and they are also the real Raftel. They are the mother's great treasure. In a daze, in front of Robin's eyes, a phantom appeared, looking at her with a smile on his face. Welcome home. Waldo stepped forward and stroked the girl's head in a gentle voice. He has always been a stern person, treating Enel, Leonard, Feslin and the group of guys very seriously. Secretly, young people call him a demon coach. But at this moment, Waldo's words are unimaginably gentle. Because it was just imagination, he knew how the girl in front of him had spent these years. How many difficulties and frustrations entangled her. Drink and drink. Celebrate Robin. Celebrate our little princess is home. Cyrus said with a laugh. Yes. Celebrate our little princess coming home. Sebastian shouted. For them, Robin is Orbige's daughter, that is, their next generation, naturally the little princess on the ship. The 1,000-year dragon held in the yard, and the dragon's eyes stared at Robin. His eyes were also soft, he felt the breath of Orbia on the girl's body. Thank you all, Robin said happily. She quickly joined the banquet, and bursts of laughter continued to spread. Everyone was drinking and singing and dancing in the yard. Robin also joined the party. The atmosphere was very warm for a while. Jiāng Liú sat there, smiling and watching. Next to him, Ace, sitting on a high place, dangling his legs. Nami held the orange juice in his hand and sucked it vigorously. Both of them stared at Robin, with a little envy in their eyes. Without Orbia, I can't reach that island, and I won't be the overlord of the sea. In a sense, it can be said that Orbia is the core of our pirate group. She is the most important factor in success. Jiāng Liú said softly. The two of them shook their bodies, and both looked at him. Why? If you want to be the One Piece and the overlord of the sea, you don't have to be strong enough and powerful enough. This crown is created by strength, courage, wisdom and luck. You need to overcome countless competitors and enemies in the vast ocean, and survive safely in every dangerous sea. Then, you must find the island hidden in an unknown location before you can succeed. After a pause, Jiāng Liú looked at Ace. I did it first, and then your father, Brother Roger. Ace was startled. Where is Raftel? Do you think I will tell you? Jiāng Liú asked back, then smiled. What you want to get, you have to give something first. In this world, there is nothing you get for nothing. Ace curled his lips, and then asked curiously, what's on that island? Do you really want me to tell you? Find flowers. Jiāng Liú asked again. No, I want to see it myself. Faced with this problem, Ace's attitude is quite resolute. Jiāng Liú smiled, not surprised by this answer. If I can teach you, I basically teach you. Armed colors, seeing and hearing colors, conquerors, are all honed over time, battle after battle, before they can truly awaken. So, next, Ace, you also have to make your own choice. Is it to stay in the black flag, continue to accept our tempering, or to find my own piece of sky by myself? After saying this, Ace's expression became serious and solemn. He was lost in thought, which was indeed a question to think about. After getting along for a period of time, he and Jiāng Liú have established a deep relationship. 0. From the beginning, the two sides have almost merged into one. Even Arlong often pulls him to drink together. Think slowly, you still have time. Jiāng Liú smiled. Ace nodded, he really needs to think about it. He was grateful for the man in front of him. What I taught myself along the way, and the improvement in strength, was something I had never thought of before. It can be said that in the past 10 years, Garp has built a good foundation for himself, but this man has trained all these foundations into practical strength, which is an achievement that can most intuitively change his status quo. Whether it is hockey's mastery, physical enhancement, or the development of Mara fruit, all of them have completed a sublimation during this time. This is very important to him. The celebration banquet was still going on, Robin was surrounded in the middle, everyone kept telling funny things and making her laugh. In everyone's eyes, this tanned, thin girl is their daughter. Time passed. 2 days later in a blink of an eye. Looking at Cobra, who was serious in front of him, Jiāng Liú smiled slightly. In other words, Your Majesty Cobra, has you mastered the approximate location of the Baroque Work Society? Cobra nodded. That Mr. Zero, can't let him run away. Crocodile, I also want to see, he has some strength now. Jiāng Liú smiled faintly. 10,000. Chapter 256. Advertise here. Then, please come to Lord Jiāng Liú. Cobra said solemnly. Behind him was Vivi. At this moment, the girl was looking at Jiāng Liú with curious eyes. Obviously he looks so young and handsome, but he has the strength to defeat such a terrifying figure Shichibukai crocodile. Does this man really have such terrifying power? Are you interested in taking a look together? Your Majesty Cobra. Jiāng Liú suddenly smiled. Me. Cobra was taken aback, then smiled and shook his head. I won't go. If you can you take Vivi to see? Also let her understand what kind of world-class power exists. Jiāng Liú looked at Vivi, who boldly stared at him. His delicate face looked very beautiful and lovely. Sure. He smiled slightly and nodded in agreement. After that, Jiāng Liú slowly got up, ready to act. Captain, do you need our help? Waldo then raised his head and shouted. Jiāng Liú waved his hand, motioning them to continue. The group gathered together at this time, playing cards, and their days were very comfortable. Ace was in the yard, sweating, getting acquainted with the new load. I want to go too. Robin shouted at this moment. Let's go. Jiāng Liú smiled. Nami raised his head, and then, at Cyrus's urging, focused his attention on the card in front of him. In this poker game, the stakes are high, and if she can win, she can get a lot of wealth. Compared to what fights, obviously the game in front of her is more important to her. Vivi and Robin ignored a glance, and both girls nodded tacitly to say hello, and then followed Jiāng Liú. In a blink of an eye, the three of them left the yard. Your Majesty Cobra, do you want to join? If you win, you can win back the domestic tax for 1 year. Guy Ram said with a smile. What? Taxes for a year? That's hundreds of millions of Baileys. Cobra shook his whole body. Do you think we guys have less than a few hundred million in wealth? Cyrus curled his lips. When it comes to wealth, the pirate is undoubtedly the richest person in the world. They have no morality, especially since they had the entire black restricted area before. The gold and treasures that came up in just 1 month are all exaggerated figures. Otherwise, how could Black Flag be the overlord of the sea? This large amount of wealth and resources is the main reason. Cobra hesitated. One gambling game may save the entire country. Sometimes hesitate, but the best opportunity will be lost. Waldo raised his head, glanced at it, and said lightly. Nami frowned, looked at the cards in his hand, and racked his brains on what to do next. Bet, what is it? Cobra asked. Alabasta is so poor now, of course he won't want your money, and we are not interested in money now. Cyrus rode. Let's discuss it later, let's talk about it first. Cobra did not hesitate and joined in. Ace was stunned to see from the side, this group of guys, even a king was pulled into the game, it was outrageous. On the streets of Albana. Robin, don't you know where the guy crocodile is? Jiāng Liú asked as he walked. He is a very careful and very cautious person. Every time he meets me, the place is different. Robin shook his head. Vivi looked at the two curiously, not knowing what the relationship was between them. Princess Vivi leads the way, but I trouble you. Jiāng Liú said with a smile. My father and I should thank you. Vivi said quickly. You are too polite. Jiāng Liú grinned. The young girl is full of youthful breath. The three of them shuttled down the street and soon arrived at the gate of a remote yard. It is far from the main city and it should be regarded as a suburb. 2 kilometers further south is an endless desert with sparsely populated surroundings, and almost no people can be seen. Is it here? Jiāng Liú said. Yeah, Crocodile and his men live here. Vivi nodded hard, his expression a little nervous. Facing the legendary Shichibukai, the big pirate crocodile, she could not avoid this emotion. Robin on the side also looked solemn. Let's just click. Look at these young pirates, they have some strength. Jiāng Liú smiled faintly, and gently pressed his right hand toward the door in front of him. When the right hand pressed on the door, a crack appeared quickly in the squeaking sound, followed by the door bursting open and rushing towards the inside of the yard. In front of the three of them, a blank area appeared in an instant. Both Robin and Vivi had shocked expressions in their eyes. Obviously the other party didn't do anything, so the door in front of him was directly shattered. At the same time, the scene in the courtyard caught the eyes of the three. A group of fierce, grim-faced guys stood up and looked at them. There are so many people. Jiāng Liú gave a chuckle and stepped in. Who are you? The headed man asked coldly, his expression even colder when he looked at Robin. What does this mean, miss? All Sunday. Robin's complexion remained unchanged and did not respond. I understand. The man nodded and sneered. You should know what will happen to Betrayal Zero. Jiāng Liú then raised his hand and interrupted the other party. Where is Crocodile? Just as the person wanted to speak, a figure walked out of the room, surrounded by smoke, and came to everyone's eyes. Unexpectedly, I would actually alarm Master Jiāng Liú to come in person. I am really flattered. In the hoarse voice, there was a little overbearing aura. In my time, I never heard of your name. Jiāng Liú smiled lightly. Compared to you at that time, I am just an unknown person. Crocodile also smiled slightly, but the dignity and seriousness in his eyes were clearly visible. In the face of an overlord of the sea, not being nervous is false. Seeing it with his own eyes, the other party shocked him even more. This look is no different from the one seen at the execution site in Logue Town 20 years ago. But how is this possible? I came here because of the entrustment of His Majesty Cobra. Please leave Alabasta. Jiāng Liú said straight to the point. Crocodile heard the words and fell silent. After a while, he smiled softly and did not respond. This means that the talk is broken. Even if you are the overlord of the last era. I want to try too. How good is it in the end? In the face of a strong man like you, I still can't restrain the ambition and excitement in my heart. Chapter 257. Advertise here. You are bold. After a moment of silence, Jiāng Liú spit out these 4 words with a smile. The times have changed. In your eyes, you were immature and young, and now you are already a well-known strong man in this sea. I stubbornly think that I am not inferior to you. Crocodile's face was filled with ferocity and madness. Facing such opponents and enemies, it is natural to be crazy. If you are not crazy enough, how can you have enough courage to attack the opponent? Jiāng Liú grinned. You will know that we are far away. Crocodile grinned, but instead of rushing up, he waved his hand. The members of the Baroque working society in the yard immediately understood the meaning of their boss, their expressions were ruthless, and they all rushed forward. Very cautious. Jiāng Liú laughed. He took a step forward, his eyes suddenly glaring out. A touch of mighty domineering spirit shook out suddenly, and the space in the entire yard seemed to be distorted at this moment. Crack. On the 18th of the wall, there were many cracks, and the terrifying coercion was crushing the hearts of everyone in the courtyard at this moment. The members of the Baroque working society who had just lifted their steps stopped in the air, the divine light in their eyes quickly dissipated, and then they turned pale and fell to the ground with a puff. The violent collision from the soul caused layers of fine sweat on the foreheads of the remaining people who did not faint, and their eyes were shocked. Buzzing. The invisible coercion shocked, and the whole yard was quiet. Crocodile's face was solemn, and the pressure in his heart surged. The body froze and couldn't move at all. What is going on? Zala, the thorn fruit-capable person, shivered, and her whole body was shocked by this invisible pressure. Turning his head vigorously and looking to the side, the other people who didn't faint also did the same, unable to move at all. This terrifying aura was shocked and lasted for nearly 10 seconds before it weakened. This man is terrifying. It's like facing a giant dragon, a behemoth. Just looking like that, my whole body is trembling. The pupils of Daz Bonus and the others contracted and stared at each other. Remove some trash fish first to survive my slight hockey shock. You should be able to add some fun to the next battle. Jiāng Liú's indifferent words seemed to be stating a fact. But it made the eyes of everyone in the yard angry, which was undoubtedly a contempt, stinging their hearts. Look at us too much. Daz Bonus roared. However, before he rushed over, Zala next to him was already in front of Jiāng Liú with an angry face. The right leg was lifted high, and the sharp thorns burst out in a moment, and then slammed into Jiāng Liú's face. The latter raised his head, staring at the opponent, and slowly raised his right hand. Too slow. With a violent grasp of the palm of his hand, Bonnie's right leg immediately stopped in the air and was grasped by one of them. Immediately afterwards, Jiāng Liú gave a squeeze. Crack. Bonnie's face changed wildly, and she let out a painful cry. Her right leg was directly pinched in half by the other party. You seem to have some misunderstandings about the overlord of this sea. I never said that I am a soft-hearted person. Jiāng Liú said coldly, and flew Pony out. Boom. A huge sound sounded, and the house not far away was directly smashed into ruins, dusty. Crocodile's face was solemn, with sand floating around him. Das Bonus let out a low growl, ran wildly, came to Jiāng Liú in an instant, and split his right arm. Either you can become a sword, or a swordsman. Jiāng Liú raised his right hand and stretched out a finger. Dang 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 dang. A series of gold and iron sounds sounded, and sparks appeared in the middle of the collision between the two, which shocked Das Bonus. With just one finger, he actually contended his own slash. Is this guy a human or a monster? Too weak. I can't interest me at all. Jiāng Liú slashed with his fingers and pressed against the blade of Das Bonus. With just such a slight pressure, the latter felt the terrifying weight, and with a bang, it directly hit the ground under his feet, causing the earth to collapse and cracks in the surrounding ground. Crocodile, it's your turn. Withdraw his finger, Jiāng Liú smiled. Crocodile's face was solemn, and he was shocked when he looked at the falling figure in the yard. Obviously, he seems to have made a big mistake in his estimation of the world's first strength. Call. Slowly exhaling, the grains of sand around Crocodile's body were spinning faster and faster. In a blink of an eye, a large swath of yellow sand flew up, covering his figure, and the entire courtyard was filled with flying sand and rocks, a cloud of mist. Sha Lan. With a low growl, the huge salon rolled quickly and swept away in the direction of Jiāng Liú. Logia, in my eyes, it's nothing. Jiāng Liú made a fist, looked at the tornado that was getting closer, and said lightly. Then he slammed a punch forward. Zongwei. The void shook, and the fist slammed directly on the tornado, and a huge fist mark emerged, and a large piece of sand was directly broken up by him. At the same time, Crocodile's figure also appeared in front of him, and the golden hook in his left hand slammed towards Jiāng Liú. The latter turned around and grasped his arm. After that, a sudden force was applied. But at this moment, the arm turned into a grain of sand, the crocodile element turned, twisted and disappeared. Very decisive. Jiāng Liú smiled. Crocodile's figure has never been far away, his complexion is extremely dignified, and he has to be cautious about encountering such an existence head-on. Suddenly bent over, his hand slapped on the ground. Desert sunflower. The ground under Jiāng Liú's feet collapsed at a very fast speed and turned into sand. These sand grains swept quickly and wrapped towards his body. Erosion reincarnation. Crocodile sharpened his eyes, then growled again. With such a trick, he believes that even if the opponent is the strongest in the world, he will suffer heavy losses after taking a blow. But in the next second, he saw that the figure wrapped in sand, twisted and disappeared. The speed is incredible. Is it just that, Crocodile? An indifferent voice came from behind him. Your weakness makes me not even interested in drawing a knife. A faint voice came. Jiāng Liú clenched his fist, and then waved it out. Crocodile's body trembles sharply, elemental without hesitation. But after a bang, he was blown out. Chapter 258. Advertise here. His complexion became shocked, and at this moment in his heart was full of incredible and thick doubts. This fist hit his face vigorously, and instantly his entire head seemed to be severely hit by a heavy hammer. Boom boom boom. His body quickly hit the ground, splashing large patches of sand and dust, and smashed the fence of the yard with one head, flew out nearly hundreds of meters, and dragged a trace on the ground to stop. Whirring whirring. With a big gasp, Crocodile struggled and stood up from the ground, with bloodline Madara Madara on his face, and there were so many bruises on his body. After standing up, his entire head was even more dazed. The weight of this punch was beyond his imagination. It was also at this moment that he clearly recognized the gap between them. How can I just admit this reality? Crocodile gritted his teeth and shook his head vigorously to keep himself awake. Soon, Jiāng Liú's figure appeared in front of him. The two stood 100 meters apart, and the other side still had that light and breezy appearance. For this battle, it was as if they were playing a game. Damn it! Crocodile gritted his teeth. His hands shook violently, and the ground shook violently in the next second, and the wind was blowing, and a large amount of sand began to levitate and rotate around him. Slowly bent over, placing his hands on the ground. Dry and cracked. Crack wipe. The strange power radiated out in an instant, the originally normal ground quickly dried and cracked, and the water was quickly drawn away at this moment. Soon, the dry and cracked ground shook and changed into a large amount of sand, rolling and shaking, and the whole ground seemed to be turned into water at this moment. Jiāng Liú squinted his eyes slightly, feeling the dangerous power, and smiled lightly. You have some talent for the development of fruit abilities. Crocodile is undoubtedly very good to develop the special properties of sand fruit. This means that he can influence the surrounding environment anytime and anywhere, transform it into his own favorable terrain, and transform it into his own domain. In a sense, this is not much different from Devil Fruit's awakening. However, the scope of Crocodile's influence is undoubtedly not enough. Crack wipe. The surrounding ground and the entire street changed into dry and cracked sand at a speed visible to the naked eye at this moment, shaking gently. Look at my strength, Master Jiāng Liú. Crocodile took a deep breath and shouted. The times are advancing. In your eyes, we little pirates who are not worth mentioning have already become big shots. Now, it's not your time. He slapped the ground with both hands and roared. Boom. In a short time, the entire street, within a range of nearly several kilometers, the sand on the ground rolled up, and the sky was covered by the sand. This was an extremely shocking scene. Crocodile created a huge sandstorm on his own. The sky is full of yellow sand, the wind is rustling, and the air freezes at this moment. The sky was covered with yellow sand, and even breathing became uncomfortable. Jiāng Liú raised his head, his black hair was blown. Watching this amazing sandstorm, he also sighed in his heart. For the development of devil fruit, crocodile is still very good even if it has not reached its limit. It's no wonder that the other party will have such confidence and dare to be so presumptuous in front of oneself. Such a sandstorm can already be called a natural disaster. Woo 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 woo. The yellow sand flew and floated, making a low howling sound, and a depressed breath came out of the entire sky. Crocodile's figure was twisted and turned into yellow sand, floating in the void, disappearing. Use your true strength, Master Jiāng Liú, otherwise, you may encounter unexpected events in the next battle. The deep voice floated in the air. Crocodile's figure looked erratic. Jiāng Liú stood there, his mouth curled, and a mocking smile appeared. It's been too long. It seems that you have forgotten the era of that year and who ruled it. His eyes suddenly became cold, and he stepped forward. With the sand floating, Crocodile did not launch an attack, but temporarily chose to conceal himself, looking for an opportunity. Jiāng Liú strolled in the yellow sand, looking very calm and casual. Suddenly, the sand particles behind him suddenly condensed and turned into a huge sand sword, slashing at him quickly. Jiāng Liú kicked out with a sharp turn. Boom! The sand sword shattered into yellow sand in the sky, floating in the void. Hidden in the dark, Crocodile's complexion was solemn. The attack power of this sand sword was not inferior to that of a real sword. With his power, it was stronger, but it was kicked to pieces by the opponent. How abnormal is this man's physical fitness? Desert knife. Suddenly, the sand particles condensed again, turned into a huge long knife, and slashed at Jiāng Liú again. Turning around, swinging a fist, the treasured sword was disintegrated again. The skill of his skill, in the hands of the opponent, is like a toy, which undoubtedly made Crocodile's mentality a little broken. Quote. Sha Lan. Quote. Taking a deep breath, Crocodile still didn't give up. A large number of sand particles quickly gathered together and entangled, and then changed into a huge tornado, only the size, it reached 100 meters. The mighty, majestic, swiftly attacking the place where Jiāng Liú was. Whirring. The wind roared, and the yellow sand that covered the sky moved his body. The air pressure has changed at this moment, and the depressed breath is crushing on people's hearts. Jiāng Liú stood still, there was still no extra action. Pull out your knife, Master Jiāng Liú. Let me, a younger generation, see your strength, let me see where the gap is with you. Crocodile's voice floated in the void, blending with the tornado. Yes, Qian Zhao. Jiāng Liú spit out 2 words. It's time to end. After the words fell, his right hand was held on the handle of a knife on his waist. Buzzing. The void was shaking, the tornado had reached 10 meters in front of him, and it was about to crush it in the blink of an eye. Behind him, there seemed to be a girl's exclamation. Suddenly, Jiāng Liú drew his sword. Choke. The light is shining at this moment, shining between heaven and earth. One sword flow. Tornado. With a faint voice resounding, Jiāng Liú waved a long knife in his hand. In an instant, the squally wind roared, and a circle of purple-blue slashing tornadoes shot out, and in a blink of an eye there was a hall of 100 meters high. At the same time, it collided with that salon roll. Boom. The light shone, the salon roll cracked, and then dissipated. Sand in the sky, floating down. Crocodile opened his mouth slightly and fell silent. Chapter 259. Advertise here. Is this your power of prosperity? Amidst the sand drifting, Crocodile's low voice came out. Jiāng Liú's long knife was slammed, and the ground was sharply slashed, cutting out long traces, and the sand in front of him collapsed. He grinned and looked ahead. Have you seen my full battle? No. Crocodile answered honestly. It is precisely because he hasn't seen him that he has all kinds of illusions and imaginations about the world's number one, and in his mind what kind of strength the other party has, how much stronger than himself, and how to fight when facing the other party. But at this moment, when facing each other, Crocodile clearly realized that everything he fantasized was wrong. He is imagining the opponent from his own perspective and with his own insights, so that he feels that he and the opponent can fight, and even turn defeat into victory. However, reality is different from everything he thought. With a slash, he slashed away his strongest attack, and slashed through the tornado like a natural disaster. Woohoo! The low whistling sound continued. Crocodile was still hidden in the yellow sand, manipulating the sand in the sky, surging towards the place where Jiāng Liú was. The last blow. If it still doesn't make any difference. Thinking in his heart, he fell silent. Then it proves that the strength of the two sides has reached a point where he cannot understand it, and it is not an enemy he can defeat at all. Buzzing. Everything in the sky was trembling, and the yellow sand in the sky trembled violently at this moment. The scene of covering the sky from the sun plunged this space into darkness. I heard that you challenged Whitebeard. What did that failure teach you? Jiāng Liú said lightly. He didn't care about the yellow sand in the sky, but Crocodile in the dark was shocked, and his eyes became gloomy. That was the time he didn't want to mention, and it was also a shame he was ashamed of. For that battle, he was depressed, and to this day, he is still at a loss. For the development of devil fruit, you are really good. Jiāng Liú issued a comment. As a pirate, you are also a courageous and ambitious guy. But it's so stupid. The faint voice drifted in the yellow sand, but Crocodile fell into anger. What do you understand? An old guy who has long been abandoned by the times. It seems that you still don't understand. Now, it's not your time. Crocodile roared, shaking his hands sharply. The yellow sand in the sky became frantic and rushed towards the place where Jiāng Liú was. It was like a terrifying rain of sand in the sky, rumbling. Jiāng Liú raised his head, took a step, and grinned. Where am I? Where is my age? Crocodile. After a pause, his long sword assumed an attacking posture. Let you see, my powerful Madara. When the words fell, his eyes suddenly sharpened, and the purple-blue breath rose from behind, suddenly soaring, shaking the surrounding void. At the same time, on the blade of the long sword, a strange aura was swept and entangled, like an invisible flame fluctuating. One sword flow. A soft whisper came out, and it resounded clearly amid the howling of yellow sand. Domineering. The blade trembled, and the entangled breath violently fluctuated, turning into flames, and then rushed out quickly. In the gloomy world, a bright purple-blue light lit up, and the invisible majesty shocked the void, causing everything to fall into silence. The yellow sand in the sky stopped fluctuating, and then the sky cracked. The yellow sand was cut apart and fell down. The first ray of light appeared, followed by the sky brightly. Crocodile was stiff and stood there blankly. He slowly lowered his head and saw his body. A clear bloodstain slowly emerged, and then bright red blood sprayed out. Fiasco. Even a fiasco he couldn't understand. Sarly. As the sand fell, the sky became brighter and brighter. Crocodile took a few steps forward, then fell to his knees with a puff. Jiāng Liú closed the knife and came to him. Crocodile. I'll tell you a truth. The strong are in themselves. The era he is in is his era. The indifferent words shocked Crocodile's body, and the blood flowed out quickly, making him a little dizzy, but he was still struggling, trying to raise his head and look at the man in front of him. In a daze, he seemed to be back 20 years ago, in Logue Town, surrounded by loud and noisy people. The man stood in the crowd, dazzling, and said with a smile on his face. Go to the depths of the sea to find it, Roger and I, put everything there. The loud laughter of the other party still surrounds her ears, reverberating endlessly. At that time, he was passionate and young, and because of the other party's words, he ran to the vast sea without hesitation. In a blink of an eye, 20 years later, this man stood in front of him. The strong are in themselves. Muttering, chewing the words in his heart, Crocodile suddenly understood. He understood the gap between himself and the opponent, and he also understood where he lost the battle against Whitebeard. Compared to the two, he himself is too weak. Suddenly, he felt his head dizzy, his head hit the ground heavily, and he lost consciousness. Has it ended? In the distance, Robin and Vivi ran over and saw Crocodile lying on the ground in a pool of blood, with expressions of surprise and joy. Crocodile, one of the Shichibukai, is so powerful, the two naturally knew in their hearts. But I didn't expect that in Jiāng Liú's hands, he would be knocked down so easily. Ended. Jiāng Liú smiled. Sharp. Robin gave a thumbs up. Vivi took out the rope from the side and tied Crocodile up anxiously. Seeing this action of the girl, Jiāng Liú was a little stunned. He was already used to it. After defeating the opponent, he turned and left. But looking at Vivi's actions, it was obvious that Crocodile was a prisoner. His complexion returned to normal. Jiāng Liú laughed. He didn't care about this behavior either. It's just a mere crocodile, which is nothing in his mind. The three of them left soon, but when they returned, there was another Vivi in the team who was in a coma and tied up with a rope. After returning to the palace, Jiāng Liú saw Waldo and others gathered together in a dignified manner. How about it? He asked with interest. Your Majesty Cobra, luck is amazing today. Nakan glanced, Crocodile covered in blood, and whispered Kaido. Chapter 260. Advertise here. Jiāng Liú was surprised, and he leaned over. Captain, this guy is bleeding and is about to die. Nakan was next to him, and after another glance at Crocodile, he said helplessly. Give it to you. Jiāng Liú waved his hand. In this gambling game, the best fortune is undoubtedly Cobra and Nami, the others are frowning. I'm very curious, you guys, how much are you going to lose today? Jiāng Liú said with a smile. No one responded to him. The cadres were very nervous, and the casino was like a battlefield, and could not tolerate a little slack and negligence. As for Crocodile, no one paid attention. Only Ace, carrying a heavy load, came to Crocodile and looked at the badly injured guy, shocked in his heart. It depends on the situation, it's a battle without suspense. How strong is Jiāng Liú? The famous Shichibukai was defeated like this. Nakan glanced at him. You are both Logia, you should be able to talk very well. Ace curled his mouth and moved back. Nakan launched an emergency treatment, and can withstand such a blow from the captain without dying on the spot, which is already considered tenacious. After some treatment, it was dusk that day, and Crocodile was out of danger, with a thick bandage on his body. This guy is lucky, Ace said. For Haichi, he doesn't have the slightest threat. Nakan smiled. In terms of the amount of reward he offered, he was just qualified to join the Black Flag. Ace was surprised, very curious about the old Black Flag. How strong was the Black Flag pirate group back then? After hearing this, Nakan smiled, and she had a very good impression of Ace. If you have the strength, you can only be a trainee crew member in the Black Flag. Ace was stunned, a little unconvinced. I'm Logia. Enel is also Logia, and it is also the thunder fruit with the strongest attack power in Logia. It took him several years of tempering before he was recognized as a full crew member. Nai Chin smiled. I haven't heard of it. If you encounter one in the future, you must compete with him. Ace snorted. Haha, I'm very curious what it will be like when you two collide. Enel is also a grumpy temper. Nakan said. Ace was more curious in his heart. The other party sounded very powerful, but he hadn't heard of it. During this time, he has also learned a lot. Many of the famous figures in Haichi, the big sea pirates, have disappeared from the eyes of the world under the deliberate influence of marine and world government. On the other side, Cobra wiped the sweat from his head. Finally won. 150 million Bailey. He never dreamed that he would actually be able to win this amount of wealth in a gambling game. This was an already barren domestic environment, and it was undoubtedly a help in the snow. Cyrus and others sighed and complained constantly about how their luck was so bad. Both eyes of Nami became Bailey's shape. Ha ha ha, laughed endlessly. Although she was not as lucky as Cobra, she also 20 million won. This is already an extremely alarming number. Cobb stretched and stood up, laughing non-stop. Everyone, I should go back to rest too. After speaking, he bowed deeply, turned and walked out. When I saw a crocodile in the yard, I smiled again and sighed in my heart. The choice to open the historical text for this group of people back then was the most correct one I did in my life. A few steps later, Cobra walked to Jiāng Liú's side, his footsteps paused slightly, his voice was low, and his tone was very solemn. Thank you, Jiāng Liú. I will remember this kind of grace for my whole life. Jiāng Liú smiled slightly, but did not respond. Soon, Cobra passed him by and disappeared in a blink of an eye. This gratitude is due to Crocodile and 150 million Baileys. Thinking with his feet, how could it be possible for a mortal like him to beat Valdo and Cyrus in a gambling game? This bet must have been tricky in the first place, and it was also planned by the Black Flag team. Cobra did not lack the wisdom that a king should have, he realized it after a little thought. Alabasta, who has experienced the crocodile incident, has long since declined, and various resources, especially financial aspects, are even more unsustainable. This 50 million Baileys can play a vital role. As long as 1 year's delay is passed, Alabasta will be able to move to a better place. And this is undoubtedly Heiki's euphemistic help. Cobra is not a person who knows not to report his kindness, he silently wrote down this kind of kindness and saves it for later return. 3 days later, a group of the Black Flag pirates left the Alabasta capital. After boarding the Black Pearl, there were 3 more people on board. The son of the devil Nico Robin, Princess Vivi of Alabasta, and Crocodile who was tied tightly and silently. 3 days after boarding the ship, the expressions were different. Robin looked everywhere at the place where her mother had been, especially after looking at Chinlonglong, he was shocked. Find flowers. Faintly, she felt a certain connection between the two. Roar. Qianlong made a deep but soft response, signaling Robin to come up. The latter did not hesitate and came to the top floor platform of Black Pearl, where simple tables and chairs were placed, and a shed was built. Robin came to the seat, sat down slowly, looked at the 1,000-year dragon lying next to him, in a daze, as if he saw the woman in his memory. The corners of her mouth were bent, and a smile appeared. Then, he placed a precious notebook on his knees carefully and opened it gently. Crocodile smiled like a self-deprecating mouth at the corner of his mouth. Ace noticed it next to him and asked, "What are you laughing at?" "Do you know, I once thought about boarding this legendary pirate ship. 0. But I never thought that I came up in this posture." Ace was taken aback. "Have you heard of Black Flag, and this ship?" "The Black Pearl, the fastest and most powerful ship in the world, how come I haven't heard of it?" "Heiki's name back then is beyond your imagination." Crocodile looked back and glanced at Ace strangely. Ace felt even more emotional. He looked at the tightly tied crocodile, suddenly made a decision, then turned around and disembarked. Jiāng Liú turned his head and stood on the bow looking down at him. Waldo, Cyrus and others were stunned. "What are you doing, boy? Get on the boat. We're going to set off." Ace smiled on his face and looked up at everyone. "The sun is good, everyone in Haichi is gentle, and it's like home here. Everyone, I suddenly made a decision." Jiāng Liú also laughed and asked again. "Ace, have you really made a decision?" "It is done." Ace took a deep breath and looked directly at Jiāng Liú's eyes. "I want to be a great pirate, and with my own ability, I will become a person within my power and shock the world. Next, you will see that my reward amount is soaring day by day. You will see my reputation, getting louder and louder. Then one day, we will meet again in the sea." After a pause, Ace smiled. "At that time, I will challenge you again, Jiāng Liú." Jiāng Liú smiled and nodded in response. "I look forward to your challenge." Then he turned his head and waved. "Everyone is here. Set sail." 1. Chapter 261. Advertise here. With the sea breeze blowing, Ace stood at the port, watching the huge black jewel-like huge ship quickly leave, his smile on his face narrowed. Next, it's my journey alone. In the future, I will definitely gather a group of reliable partners. Wait, I will challenge you again. The strong rely on themselves, and Ace also has his own dreams. He wants to be famous in this sea and obtain his own treasures by himself. Being with Jiāng Liú and his party has made him a great harvest, but it also inspired his passion. At the same time, on the Black Pearl. Just let him go like this. Captain. Valdo smiled. The dream of mankind should not be restricted. Ace has his own way. I admire him, but it doesn't mean that I have to keep him by my side. Jiāng Liú said with a smile. On the contrary, he is even more looking forward to how Ace after his own training will go in the future, and whether he will return to his original destiny. Ace, this guy is very attractive. It can be seen that everyone is in a bad mood after his departure. Waldo sighed again. We still have our own things to do. Let's cheer up. Jiāng Liú glanced around and said. Cyrus, Karma, Sebastian and others raised their heads and looked at the captain. We can't forget what Marine has done to Black Flag over the years. With the faint words, Jiāng Liú's eyes became cold. Black Flag, never forgotten. Cyrus said solemnly. The sinking of O'Hara, the death of Orbia, and the destruction of the Black Forbidden Zone are all huge hatred. The pain brought to them by the world government and Marine penetrates into their souls. What should we do? Black Flag, revenge too. With this, also tell the crew scattered around the world. After a pause, Jiāng Liú looked at the cadres in front of him, his eyes sharpened. We are back. The atmosphere of the entire pirate group suddenly became condensed, and in the next second, everyone raised their weapons. We are back. They are announcing to the sea that the return of the Black Flag also means that in the future, this pirate group will make big moves. Crocodile watched all this silently, sighing in his heart. The sleeping monster has awakened, and the world will face a huge disaster again. But what will they do next? At the same time, he was also very puzzled. In a blink of an eye, another half a month passed. Magic Valley Town. Hey, Thundering Boy, you should cheer up. In a remote, simple courtyard, a loud voice suddenly came out. In the yard, the young man with big earlobes sitting cross-legged on the ground heard the words, looked up at the man at the door, and withdrew his eyes again blankly, raised his head, and poured the drink into his mouth. Don't even recognize me, bastard. The man at the door strode over and kicked the wine jar beside the young man with big earlobes to pieces. What do you do? It's been another year since it disappeared last time. Why are you looking for me this time? The young man with big earlobes said lightly. This time, it's not just me coming to you alone. The man said, getting out of shape. Behind it, two figures came into view. Hody Jones, Faithran. What if there are two more of them? What do you want to do? The complexion of the young man with big earlobes remained unchanged. Don't think about setting up a pirate group by yourself, and then pull on me. I will always be the person of the Black Flag. His words made the three people in front of him laugh. Ha 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 ha. The man who entered first, he pointed to the big earlobe and laughed. Don't you know, Enel? Enel was puzzled and raised his head. Leonard, what is the matter with you this time? Hurry up, I have a bad temper. Black Flag is back. Leonard didn't sell it anymore, and said directly. This voice echoed in the yard, and all the voices suddenly disappeared at this moment. Enel was shocked and looked at Leonard incredulously. Do you know what you are talking about? Of course I know. Leonard threw the newspaper in his hand at Enel. The latter took it blankly, then spread it out and glanced away. In an instant, his pupils searched, his whole body shook violently, and then, Yongtian laughed. Ha 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 ha. Is this true, Captain, Brother Waldo, they are all back. Leonard grinned. Of course it's true, otherwise, I won't come to you. Enel stood up abruptly, his right hand stretched out, and a golden stick flew out of the room between the flashes of light and was firmly held by him. Then what are you waiting for? Go find them. I can't help it anymore, for 20 years. A full 20 years. I'm alive so muddled, not afraid of death, not of Marine, I just want to have a chance. A chance for me to take back all the things I lost before. Enel growled lowly, emotionally intense. Leonard felt the same way and looked serious, because he lived like this. No, not just him, the remaining hidden Black Flags are all alive like this. They are waiting for the return of the ship. Now, the time has come. There is no need to look for them. According to reliable sources, the captain and them will come to this town soon. Leonard said. So, you came here to find me from Sabayati Archipelago. Enel smiled. Good. Leonard nodded. Okay, we are waiting here. Enel shouted. The thunder light flickered and rumbling on his body, and his momentum was quite shocking. 20 years have passed, and his strength has improved by leaps and bounds. He is no longer the former trainee crew member, but the terrifying big pirate in the eyes of Marine. It's just that because of that battle, Enel abandoned himself and hid himself since then and never showed up again. At the same time, on the sea not far from Demon Valley Town, a huge, pitch-black ship was slowly moving forward, and the melodious music drifted away with the wind. Jingle bell. In the sea, a crisp bicycle bell suddenly sounded. Two shadows, one large and one small, quickly approached. Hoo hoo hoo. The sea breeze hit the figure on the bicycle, the snot bubble on the tip of the nose suddenly popped, and also awakened the sleeping man. Why did I fall asleep? A man with long fluffy hair said in a naive way. Suddenly, he felt a huge shadow covering his body, and he couldn't help but raise his head. When he saw the black flag fluttering in the wind, his body shook suddenly. Today's fortune seems not great. Chapter 262. Advertise here. Whirring. The sea breeze was a bit violent, and the man's complexion was already serious. A flag of pure pitch black came into his eyes abruptly, shocking his soul again. Black flag. In this world, in his memory, he can never forget this flag, nor can he forget the meaning of that man. Woohoo! A low whistling sound came out, and the huge black ship stopped 20 or 30 meters away from him. The invisible depression, the tense atmosphere quietly diffused, and the whole sea was slightly rippled, which seemed strangely quiet. Kuzan. After a while, there was a very soft but icy voice from the bow of the ship. Kuzan looked up, and the figure suddenly shrank his pupils, and the whole person was shocked. Sure enough, it's you. Muttered, his heart was already solemn. That man, no, that group of people, really came back. They disappeared for 20 years, as if spanning time and space, they suddenly appeared again. And, what is incredible is that the face and age of the other party still remain the same as they were 20 years ago, without the slightest aging. This also means that the opponent's combat power is maintained at its peak. The Black Pearl, above the bow. Jiāng Liú looked down, his eyes indifferent, but the aura on his body became more and more condensed. Compared with Kuzan 20 years ago, today's Kuzan has undergone tremendous changes. The first is the face, and the second is the strength. The opponent does not have the youthfulness and immaturity that he showed during the war. In the lazy breath, there was a certain kind of domineering. I heard that you are already admiral. Jiāng Liú said lightly. On the side, Nico Robin lay on the boat, looking at Kuzan below, his whole body was shaken, and his whole body was tense. Before her eyes, the scene of the war, flames, and screams again appeared in a trance. Marine Admiral, Aokiji. This man has left a deep impression in her life, which is still indelible to this day. Kuzan naturally saw her, his eyes narrowed. Why are you here? Robin moved his lips, but said nothing. Jiāng Liú spoke. I heard that you have taken care of Robin before, should I take care of you too? Kuzan. Above this sea, if it is said that the worst is the worst, then it is undoubtedly this moment. Kuzan spoke softly, and the temperature around his body suddenly dropped. Crack wipe. The ice surface under his feet was instantly frozen, the cold air surged, and it rushed towards the Black Pearl in an instant. In an instant, the hull was covered with a thin layer of ice. You are bold. Jiāng Liú spoke, his figure leapt from the bow position and dived down. He clenched his right fist, and in the blink of an eye, he was in front of Kuzan and hit him with one fist. The latter's figure flickered, avoiding the punch, and then pulling with both hands, the cold ice halberd emerged and pierced towards Jiāng Liú. Zongwei. A deep voice sounded. Jiāng Liú turned around, and the ice halberd spear shattered into ice debris at a speed visible to the naked eye, floating in front of his eyes. At the same time, his right hand was extremely fast, and he was already grabbing Kuzan's neck. So fast. Kuzan's heart was shocked, his hands stretched out, and a round of ice shields had emerged, blocking him and Jiāng Liú. Boom. The ice shield was as hard as steel, but it still couldn't hold Jiāng Liú's grasp. A hole was broken in the middle, and a spider web-like crack spread to the surroundings. He leapt back and let out a long sigh. Soon, I saw the hand that passed through the ice shield, and the ice shield suddenly shattered. Compared with before, you have made a lot of progress, Kuzan. Jiāng Liú said lightly. 20 years, you have grown a lot. Kuzan stood there, his shoulders sinking slightly, his eyes filled with dignity and solemnity, and he responded in a deep voice, Admiral is not so good. Ice appeared in his right hand, and an ice saber appeared, which he held tightly. However, I don't think it is a good thing to play against a guy like you here. So, if we can make a truce, nothing has happened to you. As soon as the words changed, Kuzan said with a smile again. What happened to Ohara? I can't assume that nothing has happened. Jiāng Liú said lightly, his eyes condensed, looking directly at Kuzan. You can't either. When Kuzan heard the words, his heart sank, and his expression became serious again. It seems that there is no way to be kind. The other party, apparently rushed to vent his breath for Nico Robin. Moreover, the matter of the black flag, I am afraid that the other party has already been extremely angry. Meeting him on a narrow road on the sea can only be regarded as unlucky for him. But even so, Kuzan still wants to fight hard. After all, 20 years have passed, and he is no longer the immature guy before. Admiral, but Marine's top combat power. In the next second, his body flashed suddenly, and he was in front of Jiāng Liú in an instant. The ice saber cut through the air, driving a sharp wind, and cutting towards his neck. Jiāng Liú stretched out his hand, with a hazy breath lingering in his hand, he squeezed the ice saber. Kuzan's pupils contracted, and the sharpness of this ice saber was not weaker than any real sword, plus his strength, how powerful it was. However, he was caught by the opponent empty-handed. Frozen. The cold air rushed out at the same time, covering Jiāng Liú's body in an instant, freezing his arms, then his body and neck. But almost instantaneously, Jiāng Liú's wrist shook, the covered ice shattered, and its immense power unfolded and rushed towards Kuzan. Before he had time to react, Kuzan's body had been thrown away, and the person flied a few times in the air before landing again. What a terrifying power! Suddenly raising his head, the oncoming wind made him immediately lower his head again, and his figure quickly withdrew back. Boom! In the next second, a foot crashed down, the frozen ice layer burst open, and the cracks rushed toward him quickly. Fighting with such a guy cannot tolerate any negligence at all. Kuzan took a deep breath. Immediately afterwards, his figure quickly disappeared, and the ice saber was covered with a layer of armament hockey. Dang dang dang. In an instant, the two collided again, and the sound of gold and iron continued. I am no longer the self I used to be. Jiāng Liú, don't you even draw a knife. Kuzan drank coldly. This is undoubtedly a great contempt, Marine Admiral, even the opponent's true strength can't be forced out. Retreating, Jiāng Liú grinned and looked at the scratched skin of his right hand. I really underestimated you. Now you deserve me to be serious. After all, it is Marine Admiral, and now Kuzan is powerful in all aspects. Chapter 263. Advertise here. Hoo. On the ice surface, the cold wind blows, ice chips are flying, and the temperature is dropping at an extremely fast speed. A thin layer of ice had formed on the hull of the Black Pearl, and the chill swept everyone's body. So cold. Nami shivered. This kid is so much stronger than 20 years ago. He can even fight the captain. Karma said with a smile. To grow into Marine Admiral, Kuzan's growth is visible to the naked eye, we can't underestimate him. Waldo said in a deep voice. Crack wipe. Above the boat, a layer of frost spread at this moment, which made everyone frown. There is no doubt that Kuzan's frozen fruit has a very wide range of influence. Its development of fruits has already exceeded everyone's expectations. Above the ice, the two figures were facing each other, and the aura on their bodies was extremely strong. Choke. Jiāng Liú drew the knife, holding the handle of the knife in his right hand, and looking forward. The former junior, standing in front of him at this moment, the strength is different from the past, which is very interesting for him. As time goes by, no one will stand still. Suddenly, a breeze was blowing. Both figures disappeared. The next second, they appeared in the center, and the two knives collided fiercely. A circle of ripples rippled up, and the ice beneath my feet shattered and cracked. The two pairs of eyes collided fiercely, the chill was raging, and the cold breath quickly swept over Jiāng Liú's shoulders. His body shook, ice chips flew, followed by a knife and swinging at the opponent at a tricky angle. It was a powerful slash, and a purple-blue light burst out and went straight to Aokiji, which was close at hand. The pupils of the latter shrank, and the eyes flickered. Observation hockey worked at this moment, his head suddenly tilted back. The slash almost wiped his forehead, and then collided with the frozen wave behind, cutting it apart, rumbling. At the same time, Aokiji waved the ice skate in his hand, and armament hockey covered it. Bang! The two completed a collision again, and the tremendous strength caused their arms to tremble, and their bodies slashed towards the rear. Somewhat interesting. Jiāng Liú grinned. This is simply a tentative attack to determine how much the opponent has grown during this period. In the next second, he leapt high, with a long knife in his hand facing Aokiji, whose head was tilted downward, and slammed it out. One sword flow. Knocking. The air wave rushed out, and the powerful slashing rushed towards the sea below. Aokiji's pupils contracted. Seeing this attack, it turned out to be a purple-blue lightning. Unstoppable. His body trembled quickly, turned into a piece of ice, and disappeared into the air. Boom. The slash collided on the ice, and a huge crack emerged in an instant, and large swaths of seawater rolled out of it. The frozen sea with a radius of 1,000 meters was directly split by this blow. Call. At the same time, behind Jiāng Liú, a softly exhaled voice appeared. As this voice emerged, he immediately felt an icy chill on his back, and his whole person stiffened. Crack wipe. In less than a second, Jiāng Liú's whole body was frozen, turned into a sculpture, and fell downward. What a difficult opponent. Aokiji retracted his hand, his eyes were solemn, and he vomited. He stared at the ice sculpture closely, and he didn't think that this simple freezing method would make the opponent lose his mobility. Sure enough, just as the ice sculpture was about to fall on the sea, a spatula flashed, and the ice sculpture shattered, and then a sharp slash rushed toward the face. Aokiji reacted quickly and immediately lowered his head. Even so, chances are that the hair will still be cut off and fall to the ice. If you don't pay attention, you will be cut. Muttering, Aokiji's eyes became more solemn. Your understanding of combat is very good. Suddenly, a cold voice came from behind, and Aokiji's whole body stiffened. Elemental. It's almost a conditioned reflex board, and his whole person is transforming into ice cubes. However, at this moment, he slashed it through, slashing it towards the sea below, preventing the process of elementalization. A sharp pain came from the back and shoulder position, causing Aokiji to grin and groan. The whole body was in the air. He immediately opened his hands and turned around abruptly, throwing several huge ice spears towards the place where Jiāng Liú was. The latter slashed open, swooped in pursuit. Aokiji stepped on the ice with his feet, and the cold air froze the wound on his shoulder. At the same time, his whole body was cold, and even colder temperatures came. In the air, white snowflakes began to flutter, and the entire sea was frozen at a faster speed, radiating to a farther range. At this moment, Jiāng Liú swung a knife again. Aokiji leapt up and avoided. The ice surface was exploded again, ice flakes flew, and the seawater rolled back to the sky, but only for an instant, it was frozen again. Quote. At such a low temperature, your development of fruit abilities has reached a very good state. Quote. Jiāng Liú stood on the ice, with hoarfrost on his eyebrows and black hair. The cold temperature, even for him, felt a little slow in his actions. The body's calories are rapidly invaded by this low temperature, and it needs to consume more metabolism and energy to maintain normal body actions. Behind him, on the Black Pearl, everyone was stomping their feet and shouting cold. He even took out the cotton-padded clothes thrown in the warehouse and wrapped them all up. It's not a shame to be able to get your compliment for my crazy cultivation and achievements over the years. Aokiji said lightly. Zhang's mouth was nothing but white air. It seems that we have to solve you quickly, otherwise, my crew may have some trouble. Jiāng Liú smiled, his right hand shook, and the frost on the long knife was scattered. In the next second, his figure flashed, and he was already in front of Aokiji. It's neat and clean, and it's just a cut. The latter raised the knife to resist, the ice saber gleamed with blue light, as tough as steel. However, this time after the two knives collided with the dog. A huge weight suddenly crushed down, Aokiji's complexion changed drastically, and the ice saber in his hand was directly broken into two halves. His figure flew back quickly, the long knife almost scratched the tip of his nose, shaking the ice directly into the cave. Next, I'm going to be a little more serious. Marine Admiral, Aokiji. Jiāng Liú raised the knife and said lightly. Chapter 264. Advertise here. Hearing this, Aokiji's complexion became more solemn, and he slowly exhaled, his eyes sharpened. Faced with an opponent like Jiāng Liú, it is natural that he cannot be negligent. It can be said that from the first second of the battle, he was under tremendous pressure in his heart. The battle that had been nearly killed in a flash gave him a great shadow to the man in front of him. For 20 years, he has often dreamed of his disastrous defeat. Now, this man stood in front of him again. Aokiji wanted to erase this shadow. The fierce battle also made him realize that he was not the immature guy 20 years ago. The man in front of him is no longer so unattainable. In this battle, he can fight. With the battle, he gradually expanded his fists and kicks, and gradually began to enter the state. Come on, Jiāng Liú. I will use this battle to erase the fear of you in my heart. Muttered, Aokiji's fighting spirit was high. This man, once defeated many famous strong men, was known as the world's #1 strong man in that era. Its existence, in that era, was a mountain in everyone's eyes, an insurmountable mountain. Jiāng Liú noticed the opponent's high fighting spirit, he grinned, but his eyes were even colder. Marine Admiral, of course it is difficult to deal with. Today's 3 Admiral, in terms of comprehensive combat strength in all aspects, even surpass Sengoku and Zephyr. In this era, it's not just the fierce generation of pirates, but also Marine. 20 years, enough time for a weak and feeble kid to grow into a strong man of the times. Kuzan, Sakazuki, Pelusolino, Shanks. But because of this, it is more exciting and makes Jiāng Liú more excited. In the next second, his figure ran suddenly, the long knife cut through the air and slashed towards Aokiji. The latter stepped on the ice and shouted coldly, "Ice thorns." Crack wipe. In an instant, under Jiāng Liú's feet and around his body, a series of sharp thorns sprang out and went straight to his body. A red light flashed in his eyes, and his body was in the gap of thorns, moving left and right, quickly dodge. In a blink of an eye, he was in front of Aokiji. One sword flow. Heavy mighty slash. With a buzzing sound, the long sword raised was as heavy as a mountain, whizzing the air and crashing down towards Aokiji. The latter has a cold face and calm eyes. He has entered a state and is fully focused on the battle. Ice capsule. The cold air surged, and the long knife was dragged to a halt under this cold breath, unable to make any further progress. Then, the creaking sound continued, and the huge ice ball began to emerge and spread to Jiāng Liú. Very good, Kuzan. Jiāng Liú exclaimed. But not enough. In the second half of the sentence, his tone has increased, and his wrist trembles slightly, and heavier force rushes out. Boom. The hockey puck was shattered directly, and the long knife smashed into Aokiji's face. The latter's pupils contracted, and his figure withdrew a step back, quickly becoming elemental, but even so, the blade still rubbed his body. Boom. In an instant, Kuzan flew out like a cannonball, dragging it on the ice for nearly several kilometers before stopping. Puff. Shaking his head to make his head sober, Kuzan spit out a mouthful of blood to the side, looked down at his right body, and his expression became serious. He can no longer feel the presence of shoulders to chest, and breathing is even more difficult. The weight of the knife, just rubbing it, caused him a heavy blow. It can be imagined how terrifying the power of Jiāng Liú is. Is this what Roger was capable of defeating Whitebeard? It's just a knife. With a heavy heart in his heart, Kuzan's expression is extremely solemn. For the first time, he felt a huge gap, something he had never felt before. But when I face you, I will never fear, and the shadow in my heart will also be dispelled in this battle. 20 years, I am no longer so weak. But the same, with the qualifications to fight you. After a few breaths, he felt his right body's consciousness recovering, but the burning pain made him grin constantly. Aokiji's heart was excited. These few battles made him feel his progress and also understood that he could fight the opponent. Now, in my heart, there is only the urge to fight you upright. How big is the gap with the number one in the world? Seeing high mountains, human beings always have the idea of crossing high mountains, and they also want to know how high this high mountain really is. Crack wipe. The ice cube covered the right body and temporarily frozen the severely injured body. This was Aokiji's temporary treatment for himself. Afterwards, he looked at the figure rushing forward, his figure suddenly bent, his hands slapped on the ground. Ice Age. Sen Leng's words were spit out, Aokiji's eyes were extremely sharp. Suddenly, the white air wave rolled on the ice, like thousands of roaring beasts, impacting forward in an instant. At this moment, the temperature dropped by how many degrees in a blink of an eye, everything in the world seemed to be frozen. A white mist was overcast, and the icy wind swept across the void. On the Black Pearl, white frost and snow were piled up, and several ice sculptures appeared quickly, which made the complexion of Waldo and others suddenly changed. Robin, Nami, Princess Vivi. The weaker person was immediately frozen under the ice cold, standing there blankly, turning into an ice sculpture. Quick! Throw them into the hot water in the power cabin. Cyrus roared. In an instant, all the people on the ship started to move, and the comrades who had been frozen or had become rigid in the corners were sent into the cabin. At the same time, the cadres were also shocked with Kuzan's power. This ability to freeze the world is really shocking. Boom. At this time, in front of Jiāng Liú, a white cold current swept across like 1,000 horses, with a terrifying aura. The air wave spread nearly tens of thousands of meters, and the entire sea surface was covered. This shocking scene is far more astonishing than the sandstorm in Crocodile. It also clearly revealed the gap between the two. His expression became serious. Jiāng Liú pulled out another knife from his waist. In the face of such an attack, he has to work hard. 2 swords. The 2 knives clanged loudly, and the icy air was blowing, covering him with frost. The terrifying white air wave made a roar and was about to engulf his figure. At this moment, Jiāng Liú waved his knife. Zan Fengshe. Chapter 265. Advertise here. The void shuddered at this moment, and the space was slightly distorted, followed by a spatula of light bursting out, sweeping in all directions. The white waves rushing ahead stopped at this moment, and time and space seemed to be still at this moment. The naked eye can even clearly see that the slash was whistling, sharp and unstoppable, slashing on the white waves. In an instant, Sennin's white waves aura was cut open, and then disappeared. Crack wipe. The ice cracked quickly, and cracks appeared on the entire ice surface, and these traces rushed towards the distance at an extremely fast speed. Above the sky, like a mirror, it shattered with a click. This knife cut open the frozen sea and also cut the sky above everyone's head. Aokiji's body trembles slightly, standing on the ice, slowly exhaling a cold breath, his eyes are already cold and solemn. It is not an important point to cut through the cold with that knife. Its main goal is yourself. Call out. The sharp slash came through the air, covering nearly 10,000 meters, and the void in front of the space was distorted, as if it had been slashed away by this knife. An unimaginable cut is also a cut that Aokiji doesn't understand. Domineering, strong, and full of power. Waiting to stop. A thought emerged in his heart, and Aokiji stretched out his hands, his eyes suddenly sharp. In this life, the only battle with this man, he must do his best. Crack wipe. Pieces of ice quickly condensed, and then connected to each other to form a huge iceberg. In a few moments, in front of Aokiji, an ice blue shield iceberg appeared, firmly blocking the front. The sharp slashes whizzed and rushed almost instantly, and then hit the iceberg in an instant, bursting with brilliant light. The air wave spread, the hat on Aokiji's head was taken away, his hair was falling and fluttering, and the surface of his body was sprayed with blood at this moment, and thousands of fine blood stains appeared. Crack wipe. On the iceberg nearly 100 meters ahead, a fine crack appeared, followed by a slight pause, and with a bang, it turned into ice debris in the sky and floated in the air. The ice surface under my feet also shattered and collapsed inch by inch. The entire frozen sea surface shook violently, and large waves rolled up in the opposite direction, making a low whistling sound. Puff. Aokiji spit out a mouthful of blood, and his face instantly turned pale. But at this moment, he didn't have the slightest time to rest, and suddenly looked up to the sky. Under the dazzling sun, a shadow fell from the sky, holding a pair of knives, and suddenly waving down. It's Jiāng Liú. His attack is so fast, so bursting. When the 2 knives were swung up, the air pressure rose instantly, and a feeling of suffocation made Aokiji's complexion drastically changed. At the same time, an extremely heavy force swept down, and the ice on the sea, which was originally only cracked, collapsed in an instant. With this knife, it was like pulling up a mountain. Aokiji leapt high, facing the sky with an ice saber in his hand. He couldn't stop or dodge the overwhelming blow. Boom. In an instant, the collision erupted, ripples spread to the surroundings, the aftermath was mighty, and the entire sea surface was sunken downward. Aokiji spit out a mouthful of blood up to the sky, the ice saber in his hand shattered, and his body fell to the sea like a cannonball. Ice Age. When he was about to fall into the sea, Aokiji stretched out his hand and gave a low voice. In an instant, Jiāng Liú, who was about to continue chasing, stiffened, his whole body was frozen into a sculpture, and the seawater that rolled up under him was instantly frozen again. Aokiji landed on the ice with a crash, his entire body shattered into icicles, and disappeared in the air with the wind. In the sky, the frozen Jiāng Liú exploded with a bang, his figure resurfaced, and then he wielded a pair of knives and whizzed down directly. Boom! The two knives slashed on the frozen sea. The entire frozen sea collapsed and shattered again, and the sea reappeared. Kuzan. Standing on a piece of broken ice, Jiāng Liú glanced around. But they didn't find the other side's figure, only an ice mark could be seen vaguely, extending and rushing towards the distance. Escape. Muttering, Jiāng Liú retracted his eyes and shoved the double knives in his hands. It is not easy to kill an admiral, and it is even more difficult if the opponent wants to escape. In 20 years, Kuzan has grown rapidly, and it has long been different from before. Find flowers. In this battle, he didn't want to really kill the opponent, more he wanted to test out the power of this era to judge the strength of the other two admiral. Turning his head, a few jumps back to the Black Pearl. The cold in the air is quickly dissipating, and the flying snowflakes are disappearing. This guy Kuzan already has such strength. Vardo said with a solemn expression. If he meets the opponent, the outcome of the battle is unknown, and it may even be against him. 20 years, you can't underestimate it, the young people of this era. Jiāng Liú said softly. Marine 3 Admiral, the Pirate 4 Emperors. They are all famous powerhouses in this world, without a few brushes, it is impossible to stand at the pinnacle of the times. 0. Everyone is okay. Soon, he asked again. It's okay. Robin, Nami, Vivi, Arlong are just hurt by the cold. Take a hot bath and they will be fine soon. Cyrus said. That's good. Jiāng Liú nodded and breathed a sigh of relief. Let's go. Go to Demon Valley Town for a little rest. The Black Pearl set sail again, shook off the broken ice in front, and drove towards the town of Demon Valley. At the same time, another place on the sea. Call. Lost. The world's strongest man. Is this the gap between me and him? There is nothing to do with him. Frozen fruit, as if it had failed. On the contrary, only hockey, physique and his own power can fight against one. Aokiji lay on the ice, pale and muttered. 20 years have passed, even if I become admiral, I am still not your opponent. His mind was very complicated, but he was also relieved. There is always a gap between people, and he is not standing still. This battle is no longer the same as the one 20 years ago. Lying just like that, all the scars on his body were frozen to prevent bleeding, while he drifted on ice. Going back for treatment. It's been a long time, I haven't suffered such an injury. After a pause, he said softly. Fight with all your strength, you can survive. This is the best recognition of my strength. 1. Chapter 266. Advertise here. Magic Valley Town. The lively sounds on the street suddenly became quiet, and everyone looked at the end of the laneway, their expressions became tense and fearful. Someone hurriedly gave way in the middle, because of anxiety, they even tripped and fell to the ground. He's here again. Isn't this guy living in seclusion on the other side of the island? I heard that he was a member of a certain big pirate group, and his strength was so strong that even Doflamingo and the gang did not dare to provoke him. Damn, he must be out of alcohol again. People cursed in a low voice. Most of the people gathered in Demon Valley Town were pirates and villains. They were not afraid of the sky, but when they saw this person, they couldn't help but get nervous. Get out of the way and block this guy's way. The consequences are very serious. Such voices one after another, the whole street expresses the fear of this coming man. Originally they certainly wouldn't be like this, but that day, this man fell down a street by himself. Among them, 30 million, 50 million, and even 80 million bounty pirates were there, so it was completely for people. Remember him. You bastards, villains, what are you all gathering here for? Kulik, a burly figure with a pinch of blonde hair on top of his head, shouted in a deep voice. The brow was even more at this moment, could not help but frown, this expression suddenly made everyone more frightened. He stepped into the street and kicked the few people who had collapsed on the ground. A bunch of scum, you shouldn't live in this world. Muttering in his mouth, Kulik lit a cigarette and looked at the sea ahead. The familiar sea breeze blew in, and the smoke filled his face, making a few memories in his face. The whole street was quiet, and Kulik was standing there, no one dared to disturb him. Suddenly, an arrogant voice sounded. What's the matter? Just came here, this Demon Valley town is not as scary as the rumors, the whole street is deadly quiet. Suddenly, the faces of the people on the whole street turned green, and they turned to look there. Bellamy, a blonde, grinned, looking arrogantly at the people on both sides of the street. Who is this guy? How dare to shout so loudly in front of that person? The new pirate, I don't think he wants his life anymore. Lawless, I don't know how high the sky is, he is going to be unlucky. Whispering, coming from both sides of the street, many people's faces showed gloating expressions. Bellamy, it seems something is wrong. Someone pulled Bellamy's clothes and whispered. Bellamy also noticed it, but he didn't care at all, instead staring at the man who was standing there smoking a cigarette. They are just afraid of this guy. Hee hee. With a grin, Bellamy's eyes showed a brutal look. He is a pirate with pursuits, dreams and ambitions. He naturally won't be afraid of what others are afraid of. The whole street is afraid of one person, which can only prove that the people on this street are all rubbish. Defeating the man in front of him will undoubtedly make him become famous and enjoy the admiration of this group of trash. Kulik woke up from the memory and looked forward. When he noticed someone standing there boldly, his eyes immediately condensed and his complexion became gloomy. Who are you? He asked coldly. My name is Bellamy, the pirate who will defeat you soon. Bellamy shouted with a laugh. I see a lot of people like you. I don't know how high the sky is, and when I lie on the ground and howl, I will know how big the world is. And your smallness. Kulik's voice was flat. He stepped forward, his knuckles creaked. Of course Bellamy didn't believe it. He smiled contemptuously, bent his knees and sank, and soon his calves became springs. You will know soon, my strength. The next second, the spring bounced violently, Bellamy jumped up high, and he laughed. This power made him enjoy. Then, it quickly ejected from the roofs and walls on both sides to speed up. This made him faster and faster, gradually turning into a shadow. He turned out to be demon fruit power, no wonder it is so arrogant. Bellamy, the guy who hasn't heard of it, is it a newcomer? It looks like it's quite capable. On both sides of the street, the pirates who watched the battle were surprised that they began to look forward to the battle. Ha 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 ha, is it already shaking? I'm so scared that I can't move anymore. I am the spring fruit of Paramesh's ability. Bellamy's laughter spread across the street, and the walls and roofs on both sides kept banging. Kulik smoked quietly and slowly spit out a smoke ring. Fancy bells, have you finished tossing? Bellamy's face became gloomy when he heard the words. It seems you can't wait to die. It was enough to show his abilities. He suddenly turned into a phantom, his fists were agitated, the springs were tight, and he was ready to go. Just wait for a punch to solve the guy he seems to hate in front of him, and let the whole street know how good he is. Call out. The extremely fast speed drew out the air with a whistling sound, and his figure arrived in front of Kulik in an instant. At this moment, Kulik's eyes suddenly flashed red. Do you think you are fast? The low and cold voice made Bellamy's complexion change drastically, because the punch he threw was completely empty and staggered from the opponent's body. With a full blow, he was avoided. At the same time, the red light in Kulik's eyes receded, and armament hockey entangled on his clenched fist, and crashed down. Boom. There was a sound that shook the entire street. Bellamy stuck his head on the ground and hit a big hole. The whole person collapsed to the ground and was in a coma. One blow. Shock, fear, and incredible sounds tore through the sky. The people on the street fell silent, and the eyes that looked at Kulik were all feared again. Call. After spitting out a puff of smoke, Kulik retracted his fist. The newcomers in this sea, and the guys with no strength, why do they like to be arrogant and domineering? Do you have arrogant capital? Stepping on Bellamy's body, Kulik walked forward. But as he walked, his footsteps stopped again, and his expression changed slightly. How can you two guys get together? With a complicated expression, Kulik sighed. Haha, don't you want to see us? Kulik, lousy really covered you back then. The words of the two figures walking towards each other made the entire street stare. Leonard, Enel, have not seen you for a long time. Excitement gradually appeared in his eyes, and Kulik hugged them. Your emotions, wait a moment to express them. Soon, you will see people who excite and shock you even more. Enel smiled. Then they turned and looked at the port location. That black flag, that black ship, is not far away from them. Soon, it will arrive. Chapter 267. Advertise here. The three of them stood together, and the momentum on their bodies surprised everyone in the whole street. Needless to say, Kulik was the man who made the entire Demon Valley feel fear and fear. What kind of guys are these two people? What do you know? Kulik said with a solemn expression. He could have a foreboding that these two guys must be hiding something great from him. What's the hurry? They will be here soon. Leonard laughed. Enel's observation hockey and Raiden merged together to form a powerful ability called the hard net, which can see far away. The other party said that, it means that the captain and the cadres are very close. They, who? Kulik was even more curious. Ha 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 ha. Leonard and Enel looked at each other and both laughed. The sea breeze was blowing, the hair on the heads of the three people was blown, and their robes were hunting and shaking. Suddenly, on the sea level in the direction of the port, a black spot appeared, and it became conspicuous after another glare. Wow. The black flag, 18 suddenly caught Kulik's eyes, and his whole body began to vibrate, and his heart beat faster at this moment. The huge, pitch-black jewel-like ship was getting closer and closer, the black flag trembling violently, and everyone saw the entire ship's face. Just the appearance of this ship shocked everyone. They had never seen such a ship before, and its speed on the sea was like wind. The elder pirates were sluggish there at the moment. Vaguely, they had the existence of this ship in their impressions. After a while, someone suddenly shook his whole body and spit out two words. Black flag. It's the black flag. The young pirates, still puzzled, mumbled, of course it is a black flag, we are not blind. Some people also realized that this ship may be the one reported in the newspapers in recent days. However, there is not much introduction to this ship, which makes them puzzled. Soon, the speed of the ship exceeded everyone's imagination. In the blink of an eye, the sea was rippling and rippled, and the huge, spectacular black ship had already leaned at the port. Yes, it's them. Kulik opened his mouth wide and was stunned. Then, there was a great surprise and excitement in his heart, and tears burst into his eyes instantly. Ship, Cadres. Kulik yelled loudly, and his feet quickly ran towards the port. Leonard and Enel behind, with smiles on their faces, followed Kulik. There is no doubt that this is an exciting scene. The black flag that has disappeared for 20 years, the captains and cadres who have been respected in the hearts of the three, return to them at this moment. 20 years have passed, many things have changed, but many things have not changed at all, such as the feelings between them. When the Black Pearl came to a complete stop and the people on board jumped off the ship, a group of figures also appeared in front of the three of them. The headed man, with 2 knives slung around his waist, was burly in shape, and his black robe was loosely tied. His black hair was simply tied up. The man next to him, holding 2 small black cannonballs in his right hand, was encircling his hands. Looking aside, the burly man was watching them smiling, carrying a big sword on his back. Captain, Brother Waldo, Brother Cyrus. It's really you. You guys are really back. Kulik shouted excitedly, tears welling up in his eyes. Kulik. Jiāng Liú laughed, looked at the running man, and recognized it at a glance. Compared with 20 years ago, the other party has now become a mature uncle. This difference makes him a little surprised. Looking over Kulik, he saw Leonard and Enel, who were middle-handed, dressed in a suit and shabby. The three of them are no longer teenagers, but the eyes that look at him at this moment are still as they were before, full of respect and excitement. As this Kulik, Waldo said in surprise, Cyrus also had an incredible expression. It looks as old as me. Karma laughed. Captain, officers. Enel and Leonard also arrived, and they embraced everyone excitedly. 20 years, you are finally back. Kulik said with excitement. I have been waiting for you for a long time. Enel said in a deep voice. The lost things, people and things, we should get them back. Leonard looked serious. Jiāng Liú stared at the three of them. He could see the three of them in front of him, and the thoughts in his heart were the same. Rest assured, a positive expression was given to the three of them, and there was a touch of awe-inspiring gaze in his eyes. Black flag, but it has never been a pirate group that has no revenge. After a pause, he smiled again. We meet again, should we hold a banquet first? Just in this Magic Valley town. The three of them all smiled and laughed. They were full of expectation. In the battle that year, everyone in Haichi suffered heavy losses, some died in the battle, some fled, and they were scattered all over the place incognito. Everyone is waiting for the return of this group of people in front of them, and now they finally reappear, and the name of the black flag will resound above the sea. After a while, everyone gathered in a spacious bar, laughing constantly. Arlong was wrapped in a quilt and sneezing. Hody Jones next to him asked what happened. When he heard that he met Marine Admiral Aokiji, he looked surprised and surprised. At the bar counter, the boss shivered. Just being a Kulik made him terrified, and there was another group of guys called captains and officers. How does this make him not shocked? Captain, what shall we do next? Enel drank the wine from the clean glass and asked loudly. On this road, there are still many scattered companions, let's bring them back first. Jiāng Liú said with a faint smile. After a pause, his tone became low again. Then, it's revenge. Let Marine know, Laozi's anger, let the world know, we are back. I want to cover up us, I want to obliterate everything about the existence of the black flag. Never possible. Fierce and ferocious flashed in Enel's eyes. That should be done. They are lawless pirates, how can they have no revenge? Chapter 268. Advertise here. Magic Valley Town, in the bar. This is a celebration banquet of laughter, but it is also a swearing party that decides the next action of the black flag. After staying in the town for only 2 days, after purchasing the necessary supplies, the Black Pearl set off again. Go to the city of 7 waters. Frankie and Ace Bagu are now hidden there. Kulik lay on the boat and said. In 20 years, many things have changed. With the departure of the captain and cadres, the younger generation also dispersed. Back then, the Tom shipbuilder's affairs shook the world and caused a lot of noise. The two rushed to the city of 7 waters from New World, but they still didn't change much. Today Ace Bagu is the head of the city of 7 waters. Frankie. At this point, Kulik fell silent. He has changed a lot. Waldo, Cyrus and others all showed doubts, while Jiāng Liú narrowed his eyes. No matter what changes, when the captain arrives, they all have to react. Leonard said. We haven't seen each other for nearly 10 years. After the black flag disappeared, the crew was scattered all over the world, naturally there was no contact, and there was no hope of gathering together again. The deputy captain of Letterfield was able to gather everyone, but in the end, he was also arrested into impel down, and the entire black flag was naturally disbanded. 7 days later, the Black Pearl docked on the coast of the capital of 7 waters. Go find Ace Bagu first. Waldo said. He had a very good impression of the comboy back then. All of them were covered in black robes, while Karma and Sebastian stayed behind on the Black Pearl. At the same time, the inner bay of naval headquarters. What's that? A piece of ice? No, there are people on the ice. The Marines looked at the sea in amazement, and said in surprise. When the ice cubes quickly approached, their eyes widened. That's it. Aokiji Admiral. He has wounds all over his body. Quick, notify your superiors. For a moment, the Marines became nervous and shouted loudly. When Aokiji, who was in a coma, was transferred to Marine Hospital, Sengoku was already alarmed, and he looked at Aokiji who was lying on the hospital bed with a solemn expression. Such an injury is not minor. There are only a handful of people in this world who can hurt Aokiji who is admiral like this. It's that man. Aside, Sakazuki and Pelusolino both said solemnly. Your guess should not be far from the facts, but the specific situation still has to wait for him to wake up. Sengoku said solemnly. The actions of this group of people did not hide their traces. Now they have reached the city of Seven Waters. It can be blatant. As he said, Sengoku's eyes became serious. So, Master Marshal, what do you think? If you want to do something, now is the best time. If he waits for him to gather the crew scattered all over the world, I am afraid it will be even more difficult to deal with. Pelusolino said with a smile, but his eyes were full of seriousness and solemnity. It's not that simple, Kizaru. Sengoku said. Just Jiāng Liú alone will have to rely on the three young admiral of you to resist it. The strength of other cadres is not trivial. With the current marine alone, it is very difficult to start a dignified war with them. And, after a pause, Sengoku looked more serious. The age and strength of Jiāng Liú and others are probably not any decline compared to 20 years ago. They are still in their peak state. These 20 years have seemed to have been passed through by them. Time hasn't left any traces on them. This has to make people wonder what they have experienced. Upon hearing this, Kizaru and Akainu also fell silent. This group of guys are very troublesome. It should be more than us who should have a headache. Now, there is no news from the world government. The five old men, I am afraid it will be difficult to sit still. Sengoku said. The most important thing in front of me is to make Aokiji wake up quickly. Marine lacks an admiral like him, and it will be a lot of trouble. At this point, his eyes sharpened. I have a hunch that even if we don't use any means against the Black Flag Gang for the time being, they will probably get into friction with us soon. Do not forget, Letterfield is still impelled down, the great prison under the sea. These words are sonorous and powerful, and the tone is extremely solemn and serious. Some words made the atmosphere heavy in the entire ward. But don't worry, if they are willing to fight in Marine's hinterland, it will only be against them. Quote. I want to come to Leadfield, I will be ready to wait for them. Quote. Sengoku said lightly, but the atmosphere did not relax, on the contrary, it became more solemn. He knew very well that Jiāng Liú was not the kind of commander who was brainless, only charged and impulsive. On the contrary, compared to Marine, he is more thoughtful and despicable. It is conceivable that once the opponent wants to rescue Leadfield, they will inevitably start an unprecedented battle around Impel Down. The city of Seven Waters, the chief's office. Mr. Shi Chong, who said it was your deceased person, here comes. The female secretary's voice sounded outside the door, and Ace Bagu took off his glasses and looked at the door with a calm expression. He had a hunch that Haichi had been a partner, but he didn't know who it was. It has been nearly 10 years since he has seen each other, which made him sigh that time has passed so fast. Khalifa, come in, Ace Bagu said aloud. The door opened soon, Nuo Zhao, but it was not a single figure, but a dozen. The burly figure of the other party surprised him even more. The one standing in the forefront was a lot taller than the door frame, and he was nearly 3 meters tall. Ace Bagu, long time no see. There was a gentle voice, and the man took off his coat and hat, revealing a handsome face. This face made Ace Bagu's pupils shrink, and the whole person was stunned. Immediately afterwards, there were a group of figures behind him, all of them taking off their coats and hats, and the exposed faces made Ace Bagu even more shocking. Yes, it's you. Ace Bagu stood up abruptly, his expression agitated, and tears welled up in his eyes. The little kid back then is so old now. Waldo laughed. On the side, Khalifa helped his glasses, his eyes twinkling, carefully watching the group of people who suddenly visited. Who are they? Chapter 269. Advertise here. As a member of the CP9 organization, she has been lurking beside Ace Bagu for some time, and she has also done some investigations on this Mr. Shi. But the group of people who suddenly appeared in front of her at this moment were not in her investigative intelligence. Just by observing the temperament, she was able to see that this group of people was not kind, most likely to be pirates. The Shi of the city of Seven Waters knows people like pirates. This surprised her a little. Ace Bagu. Cyrus also called out, and glanced at the female secretary in front of him. He keenly felt that this female secretary was a bit unusual. Khalifa, you go out first. Ace Bagu reacted quickly and nodded to Khalifa. The latter helped Khalifa on his glasses, without asking more, turned and left. A group of figures quickly squeezed into the office, and then the door slammed shut. Captain, Brother Waldo, Brother Cyrus, Enel, Leonard, Horty Jones, Arlong, Kulik, you all are here. Ace Bagu said excitedly at this time. We are back. Jiāng Liú said with a smile. 20 years have passed, you have changed a lot, and you have become the leader of this city. Waldo said in surprise. Today's Ace Bajiu is gentle and mature, and he can't tell that the other party is a pirate. A lot of things happened in the middle, and something happened to the teacher. Frankie and I can only come back. Then something happened to Haichi again. Ace Bagu sighed. So, how are you going to choose now? Ace Bagu. Leonard laughed. Should you follow us, or continue to be here? Enel asked. Asiba showed a hesitation on the old face and appeared silent. Everyone was not in a hurry, and waited patiently. We respect your choice, Ace Bagu. Looking at you like this, the pirate is obviously not for you anymore. Jiāng Liú suddenly laughed. The former Ace Bagu was a passionate boy who could yell at other crew members on the ship and order them to do things. Although young, his spirit is extraordinary. But now Ace Bagu is more like a politician than a pirate. Captain, Ace Bagu shouted quickly. He was reluctant to bear this group of people in front of him. His youth, what he had was them, and now he appeared in front of him again. How could he have no idea? However, to let him go to sea again, he knew clearly that it was no longer appropriate. As the head of the city of Seven Waters, he can't just leave irresponsibly. There are still many things waiting for him to deal with. It's good to be along, she. Waldo also said with a smile. You guy is very prosperous. It's a beautiful job to be a long-term leader. You should practice more, and wait for us to seize the site and let you be the owner of the island. Cyrus also spoke. Everyone. There were tears in Ace Bagu's eyes, moving, reluctant, and nostalgic. Continue to be your boss, I never force my crew. Jiāng Liú patted the other person on the shoulder and smiled. Me, am I still from the Black Flag? Ace Bagu said nervously. Of course, as the captain, I order you to be the captain in the capital of Seven Waters. Our plan is very ambitious. You can help us a lot here. Jiāng Liú laughed. The fact is indeed the case. Taking back the lost Black Flag and reorganizing the Black Flag is just the first step, and there are many things left. Ace Bagu nodded heavily. He knew very well in his heart that this was a task specially arranged for him by the captain, and he was taking care of him. Where's that kid Frankie? Jiāng Liú asked again. Ace Bagu hesitated to speak. I haven't seen him anymore. He shook his head again. Come here today, just to meet you first, Frankie kid, we will find him later. Jiāng Liú smiled. Afterwards, everyone went out. Khalifa, help us arrange a secluded place. Ace Bagu beckoned. Khalifa, wearing glasses, nodded, making an okay gesture. You secretary, there are some questions. When everyone was walking on the street, Waldo suddenly spoke. Yes, Ace Bagu said in amazement. After you became a pirate, didn't you even lose any alertness? Cyrus also smiled faintly. Our rear left, front right, and a room on one side are watching you. Oh, besides that, there is also your beautiful female secretary named Khalifa. Enel chuckled. Ace Bagu's complexion changed, and his eyes became serious. Do you know their purpose? Jiāng Liú asked. Probably I can guess it. Ace Bagu sighed, then did not hide it. It should be the Pluton design drawings left by the teacher. They should be from the world government. Jiāng Liú smiled, naturally knowing this in his heart. When you leave, we will solve these things for you. But after that, you have to be more careful. Ace Bagu nodded. I will. After that, everyone stopped talking about it. Khalifa arranged a secluded specialty restaurant for them, and he was not close to him, but only waiting in the distance. His words and deeds are just a secretary, unable to pick out the slightest flaw. Soon, a meal is over. You go to your own work, let's go to Frankie. After a pause, Jiāng Liú smiled again. As for the little things around us, we will solve them for you. Enel smiled at this moment. This kind of miscellaneous fish, leave it to me, Leonard, Kulik, and Horty Jones. Ace Bagu also smiled. Okay. Frankie has changed a lot since Mr. Tom died. Seeing you, he should be back on track again. Leave it to us. That kid, he's not the one who has suffered setbacks and just slumped. Waldo turned and stretched out goodbye. Jiāng Liú, Waldo, Cyrus and other cadres went to find Frankie. After Enel, Leonard, Kulik, Horty Jones and others looked at each other, they all nodded tacitly. After Ace Bagu and Jiāng Liú and others left, Enel glanced around suddenly. Resolve these concealed mice. This is a very simple thing. Leonard sneered. There is no need to install it anymore, come out. Kulik shouted. In the distance, the pigeon man Rob Lucci, Kaku, Bluno and others are still doing their own things, as if they hadn't seen it. Hee, do you really think you are hiding well? Enel laughed. In the next second, lightning flashed from his body, suddenly disappeared, and instantly appeared in front of Lucci. Above the golden long stick, the electric light flickered, and suddenly it slashed. Chapter 270. Advertise here. Rob Lucci, who had a calm face and even disguised a touch of surprise, saw the shocking attack, his pupils suddenly shrank and his figure suddenly flickered. This stick, standing there forcibly, I am afraid it will be hurt. Moreover, the other party had clearly sensed his identity, which also made him very puzzled. It stands to reason that I pretend to be very good. Neither Ace Bagu nor the guys at the shipyard found it. How can an outsider who has just arrived in the city of Seven Waters easily detect their identity? Boom. The thunder roared, and the golden stick, carrying the power of thunder and lightning, slammed into the place where Lu Qi was originally standing, and suddenly a scorch mark appeared on the ground. Who are you? Enel turned his head and looked at the roof on one side of the street. Lu Qi's voice came over. This is exactly what I want to ask you. Surveillance Ace Bagu, try to commit a crime, when we guys don't exist. When Rob Lucci heard the words, his eyes condensed. In my information, Ace Bakak doesn't have a friend like you. Friend. Enel laughed, and the long stick flicked, and the thunder suddenly burst, and a blue arc flashed across his body. You may have misunderstood. Ace Bagu is not our friend. After a pause, his figure flashed, and the arc suddenly stretched, twisted, and prolonged, and instantly reached Lu Qi's face. We are brothers. A life and death partner. Boom. With the sonorous and powerful voice, the roof suddenly exploded along with the roar of thunder. The two figures collided. Rob Lucci looked solemn and stared at the strange man holding a long stick. Who are you? He asked again. This doubt is normal. In the limited intelligence network, there is no man in front of him who can release a little thunder and lightning. Who I am? Haha. It seems to have disappeared in the world for too long. Even a chopstick like you doesn't know my name. Enel burst out laughing. His eyes were sharp, and the long stick in his hand swiped again, pointing to Lu Qi. Alright, let me tell you. My uncle's identity is the Black Flag Pirates, Thor, Enel. After a pause, Enel flashed with electricity, and the blue arc turned into a line of teeth and claws, spreading towards the front. If you were born early, you might be lucky enough to have seen my name on a certain reward order. My reward amount. Boom. A long stick pointed, a thunder dragon roared, whizzed out, and went straight to Lu Qi. 1.3 billion Baileys. Rob Lucci's whole body was shaken, his eyes were flooded with blue arcs at this moment, and the name of the Black Flag shocked him instantly. Black Flag. You said you are the Black Flag. This doubt has just been raised, and the blue thunder dragon has already rushed towards him. Shave. His figure flashed again, and Rob Lucci appeared behind Enel. Since you know the name of the Black Flag, it's easy to handle. Enel said lightly, and didn't turn around either. Rob Lucci stretched out his finger, poked it out with one finger, and went straight to the opponent's head. Although there are still many doubts, when fighting, naturally rushing towards the purpose of killing the opponent. Finger pistol. However, the finger pistol directly penetrated the back of the opponent's head, and the entire arm went through. This caused Rob Lucci's pupils to shrink and he was shocked, and immediately realized that it was not good. It's not that thunder and lightning are used, but... Logia. Enel's head turned into a blue arc, and he slowly turned around, looking at Lu Qi. It seems you don't understand the gap between us at all. Yes, even someone who doesn't even know I am, how can I know my amazing power? As he said, he stretched out a finger slowly and quickly, aiming at Lu Qi. I will let you make a living, to understand and understand me, to understand and understand the Black Flag. Then you will realize who we are. Lu Qi's pupils contracted, and then he saw a blue arc flashing suddenly, filling his eye sockets, followed by enlargement. Boom. A huge thunder pillar hit him, knocking him out, drowning in thunder light. Consciousness disappeared in an instant. On the other side, Hulick, Leonard, and Horty Jones were all upside down with severely wounded figures. It seems we are about the same speed. Enel flashed with thunder, came to a few people, and said with a smile. Find flowers. It's nothing more than a miscellaneous fish that even hockey hasn't mastered, just learned the 6 forms. How could it be our opponent? Leonard laughed. Let's go. Hulick clapped his hands. Horty Jones embraced his arms and nodded. His strength is weak among several people, but it is also very easy to solve these people. On the other side, Jiāng Liú and others have also arrived on this island, at the door of the famous Frankie family. This kid is really two extremes with Ace Bagu. Waldo smiled lightly. He doesn't dare to listen to me, I will beat him fiercely. Cyrus said. Jiāng Liú laughed and said. Go in. Ace Bagu said that this kid has changed a lot, just look at his changes. 0. Frankie's house. Boss, I'm so hungry. The woman on the side sighed and touched her sunken belly. Go get something to eat, grab it or steal it. What are we? We are bad guys and hooligans, so we should do what hooligans should do. Frankie, with blue hair, said loudly. 20 years have passed, he looks unshaven, and his appearance has matured a lot, but he is different from the original book, and he has not reformed himself. His face was a bit different from when he was a teenager, with a few more scars, it looked fierce, and it was difficult to recognize that he was the Fram before him. Speaking of it, the name of Frankie was originally called by Jiāng Liú directly, and everyone was also calling it, and Frankie's original name was Fram. After returning to the city of 7 Waters, he kept his name incognito and used Frankie's name to do things, and no one noticed him. On weekdays, he never comes into contact with Ace Bagu. Suddenly, the closed door suddenly banged. The Frankie family, who was resting, was awakened immediately, and Frankie sat up immediately. Who dares to find Lousy's bad luck? As soon as the words were shouted, the closed big iron gate was torn apart with a bang. At the same time, burly and terrifying figures appeared in front of everyone. Frankie, you should get on the boat and go. A serious, low voice also rang. Suddenly, Frankie's whole body was shocked. 10,000. Chapter 271. Yes, who is it? Frankie felt a familiar breath, but the door was suddenly opened. The sun was so dazzling, he couldn't see the other side clearly for a while. In his mind, he had already thought of the possibility, or the person he was looking forward to. The whole body could not stop shaking at this moment. Soon, when his eyes became familiar with the brightness in front of him, the faces of familiar figures came into his eyes. Captain, Brother Waldo, Brother Cyrus, Frankie yelled. Tears from his eyes popped out instantly, and his whole body trembled with excitement. Next to him, everyone else stared at each other with wide-eyed eyes. Boss Frankie's captain. Then they are, the pirate group that the friend was in, the boss used to say. Black Flag. For a long time, they lived with Frankie. Frankie also told them for a long time that he had a friend who had gone to sea before, and they had conquered the whole world and were men who surpassed Roger, the One Piece King. You guys, you are finally back. Wow, oh. Frankie cried and ran over and threw himself into Jiāng Liú's arms. Come to call you to set sail, we still have a lot to do. Jiāng Liú smiled and patted each other, comforting. Speaking of it, the face of the other party at this time looks older than himself, but this guy can't stop crying like he has seen an elder. Woohoo, I have suffered a lot over the years. I miss you all the time. Marine, world government, it's too much, they killed Teacher Tom, oh. Frankie snots and tears, like a kid who finds an adult to sue, complaining of all the evil of the enemy. We all know it, Jiāng Liú said in a deep voice and patted the opponent on the back. Everything will seek justice. Now, stop being your children, they are all so old, and they are still like a child. Frankie's tears still couldn't stop, but he held back and kept sobbing. When shall we leave? Frankie asked, crying. Soon, I have been to Ace Bagu. He will stay here and continue his mission. And you, want to go to sea with us, the Black Pearl is waiting for you to control it. Jiāng Liú said with a smile. Frankie kept nodding his head, how could he have a little resistance? The pirate's dream, almost throughout his life. He will never forget the people in front of him. Captain, Cadres, you seem to have hardly changed from 20 years ago. Frankie followed. Again, it's a long story. Jiāng Liú and others looked at each other, then smiled. Go get ready, we're going to set off soon. Waldo said again. Before leaving, I want to talk to my little brothers, Captain, Cadres, can they come on board with me, and we have a banquet together? Frankie hesitated, then said again. Jiāng Liú was stunned, but soon saw other young people sitting in this warehouse-like room in front of them, weakened. He immediately understood Frankie's careful thinking, this guy wanted to eat for his little brother. Sure. A smile appeared on Frankie's face, and he turned excitedly. Why are you still stunned? Get up. You have something to eat. After a while, on the Black Pearl, the smell of wine was tangy, and various delicacies were quickly brought up. Frankie's family looked at the ship dumbfounded, shocked in their hearts. Especially when seeing the Millennium Dragon Empress, the impact from the soul is unimaginable. Everything the boss said turned out to be true. Dragon. There are Murloc partners, as well as powerful captains and officers. Blinking, Frankie's family was excited, drinking and eating meat. Enel and others also returned to the ship at this time. Oh, Frankie, you haven't grown much in these years. Boy, don't forget, you are just a generator with me. Frankie fought against each other and raised his fists, but his eyes were filled with excitement and smiles. Haha, you are not my opponent now. Enel grinned and laughed. The two quickly hugged each other, and Chi-Chi said, Brother, long time no see. The whole ship soon burst into laughter, and everyone was excited and celebrated with excitement. At the same time, the CP9 and others who fell on the street were also quickly discovered. In the shipyard, beside Ace Bagu, less than an hour before and after, people with white eyes and comatose appeared. The news was quickly received by the world government. The Terracotta Continent, the Holy Land Mariajoy. It was still there, in the magnificent palace. The atmosphere was solemn, solemn and solemn. Looking at the photos on the table and the brief reports, the five old men became silent. How can CP9's behavior be exposed? Furthermore, it was discovered by the group of Haichi. Is it just a coincidence? But it's too weird. The voice sounded very quickly, and every sentence was very heavy and serious. This team is responsible for the Pluton problem left by Tom that year. They exposed, which means that Pluton may be exposed. Tom, Roger and Jiāng Liú were in contact back then, so we can guess that the Haichi gang may also know Pluton-related information. If this is the case, the problem is even more complicated. The palace fell silent again, and the five old people were all meditating. After a long while, the voice sounded again. Black Flag and Roger have both reached that island. They may know a lot of things that the world doesn't know. For us, they are a huge threat and must be eliminated as soon as possible. The problem we are facing now is that the black flags that have been covering up for nearly 10 years may no longer be able to make them disappear. In that case, simply let the world know about them. Unlike 20 years ago, this is a brand new era, and the situation may be beneficial to us, but it is not yet known. The old voice sounded slowly. Press for a while, let their reputation resonate in the world again, and it will be even more troublesome for us. Be prepared early so that you can deal with them more easily. In a blink of an eye, a day passed. The Black Pearl also set sail again, but this time their purpose is surprising. Eni's lobby. Frankie shouted in shock. Why are you going there? Jiāng Liú stood on the bow, smiling slightly, but his eyes were cold and stern. Get back some interest first. World, Marine, owes me the black flag. Got it. His gaze crossed the sea and looked into the distance. Start by destroying Eni's lobby, tell them. My Jiāng Liú's anger. Burning. Chapter 272. Advertise here. Boom. The sky was densely covered with dark clouds, the blue arc was constantly flashing, and the roar of thunder shook people's hearts. Not long ago, the sky above Eni's lobby still looked like a clear sky, but suddenly it became like this. This had to make the Marines stationed in the Eni's lobby lament that the climate in the Grand Line is volatile, which is beyond human expectations. This is Eni's lobby, also known as the island that never sleeps, established by the world government. There is a court in name, and anyone who enters the island will be recognized as a criminal. From here to the Gate of Justice, there will be two exits, one is Naval Headquarters Marineford, and the other is the deep-sea prison that imprisons the innocent prisoners in this world. Impel down, impertinent. In other words, this is the gateway to Naval Headquarters and Impel down, and it is the gateway to the World Government Hub. Its importance can be imagined. Since it was established, it has never been breached, because it has become an island that never sleeps all year round. At this moment, the Marines looked up at the sky, their expressions a little worried. Eni's lobby hasn't seen this kind of weather for a long time. The thunder roared 18 times, and a torrential storm was about to fall. This is indeed not a good sign for Eni's lobby, which is known as the island that never sleeps. I have a bad feeling. The man with the rank of colonel on his shoulders said softly. The unusual weather and unusual atmosphere made him feel a little gloomy. Standing on the tower gate, looking towards the main entrance of Eni's lobby, there was a calm place, no accidents happened, only the dark clouds and thunder in the sky made people feel depressed. As if disaster were about to happen, the colonel's heart was heavy. He took the telescope and looked around again. Everything that came into my eyes was calm, and nothing happened. Soon, he laughed at himself. I think too much. What happened to Eni's lobby since it was founded? This is the center of the world, a symbol of the union of more than 300 countries. Who dares to make trouble here? After Chang Zi relaxed himself, the colonel whistled. But inexplicably, what he worried about was even more serious. The sky above Eni's lobby gradually became darker and darker, and the dark and oppressive light made everyone on the island feel depressed. The island that never sleeps suddenly becomes as if entering the Black Yoruichi, which is a bit unusual. Whirring. In the air, there was wind blowing the robes of the soldiers. Boom. In the sky, the roar of thunder and lightning became more and more violent, and the meandering blue arc flickered more and more violent. Suddenly, the dark sky became extremely bright. Boom. A huge thunder, winding and twisting, hit the ground of Eni's lobby in an instant, making a deafening sound. Thunder and lightning have struck down. Oh my god, that piece of ground exploded directly, and it was scorched. How do I feel that this cloud is not right? It seems to be too close. It's too close. The Marines looked uncertain and a little frightened. Surely unusual. The colonel's complexion became serious, he picked up the telescope and looked at the sea again. What caught my eyes was still a calm sea, and there was nothing unusual about it. But he was too convinced of this feeling in his heart, the telescope diverted his eyes and scanned the other directions at the front door. Suddenly, a black dot appeared. What is that? The colonel's eyes widened, his gaze locked to the black spot in the northwest direction ahead. The sea undulates, and the black spots approach quickly, and the speed is a little unbelievable. In a few blinks, it grew bigger. The flag is pure black. The colonel first saw the flag flying on the mast of this ship. It was a unique, pure and dark flag, like a pirate, but not like it. Who is it? The colonel was puzzled subconsciously. But soon, his whole body was shaken suddenly, and he hurried back to the office to look through the thick pile of newspapers. When a dark ship appeared, the colonel's pupils shrank and his complexion changed drastically. It's him, Black Flag. This is the Black Pearl. In an instant, he confirmed the identity of the opponent. Taking a deep breath, the colonel walked out again and looked at the sea. The Black Pearl was incredibly fast, and in a blink of an eye, it was getting closer and closer to the Island of Justice, with only less than 5 kilometers left. The pirates who have disappeared for 20 years are turned out to be them. I came here for what? The colonel turned his head, very puzzled. Come hit Eni's lobby. He couldn't believe it, and he wasn't sure that the other party really had the courage to do this. This is the world-famous Eni's lobby. It is a serious crime to destroy the Eni's lobby and disrupt the order of private hair. Who dares to risk such a big deal? However, he quickly removed the phone worm and was ready at any time. Once he noticed something was wrong, he immediately notified the headquarters and asked for support. He had never seen the pirates of the Black Flag group. He only learned from internal rumors that even Admiral could not pick it up. It was a terrifying group of pirates. Just relying on the strength of the Eni's lobby, I am afraid that there is no way to take them. Soon, the dark, jewel-like ship docked at the port at the main entrance of Eni's lobby. Notify all garrisons and be ready for battle at any time. If a pirate arrives, be alert and don't be negligent. He picked up the microphone and spoke in a deep voice. The sound quickly spread throughout the Ennie's lobby, and the Marines woke up. After looking at the dark clouds and lightning in the sky, everyone tightened their rifles, took a breath, and looked at the door. At the same time, the front entrance of Ennie's lobby finally reached. Enel's movements are very fast, thunderclouds have covered the entire island. This scene is really spectacular. Is he planning to bombard the entire Ennie's lobby? Everyone raised their heads and looked at the sky, and they all spoke out. Amidst the thunderclouds, a figure hovering cross-legs was faintly visible, with a blue arc shining all over its body. When we go in and disturb the island, the final bombing cover attack will be handed over to him. Leonard drew the long knife from his waist and said with a smile. Jiāng Liú stood on the bow, looked at the front door, smiled faintly, and held his right hand on the handle of the knife. It's time to start work. Guys.